Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to SCDawah Live. Today we're going to be discussing a very interesting topic. What happened to New Atheism? Is New Atheism dead? This social movement was supposed to engulf the entire world in what they term as reason, rationality, and a new enlightenment with the likes of Richard Dawkins, who calls himself a child of the Enlightenment, and with Sam Harris, Daniel Dennett, and the late Christopher Hitchens, together with other popular atheists, they were supposed to bring a world very different to the world that we see today. So I have an esteemed panel of guests today to discuss this topic, and in fact, some of them have directly engaged with some of the most prominent figures in the field of atheist apologetics. So with me today, mashallah, is Hamza Sotsis, Abbas, and Muhammad Hijab. Assalamu alaikum, everyone.
Somewhat I'm the odd one out because I haven't debated anybody renowned within New Atheism. So I think Hijab and Muhammad, mashallah, brother Sotsis have got.
Well, neither have I.
Oh, you haven't. So it's all on Sotsis' shoulders today.
Water, so
what's the name of that guy that you debated in America? The old man.
Yeah, Edward Habash. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
I mean, he was definitely someone who was. Yeah,
definitely. So yeah. Also, I mean, Abbas, you, mashallah, you know, I've seen you interact with, you know, I guess they're fanboys in Speaker's Corner. You know, the people who they're not quite up there with New Atheists, but you know, they do try and you know, emulate them in the best way that they can. So let's start off with I think I'm going to start off with Hamza here. So Hamza, you know, you had a debate with Lawrence Krauss, and I think that was one of the landmark debates which really set the tone in terms of the way that we interact with these New Atheists. And I think you were debating them at the time that they were taking off and at the time that they were at their peak. And now you're the one who actually suggested this title, you know, the Death of New Atheism, question mark. So what are your thoughts on this topic?
Yes, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Jazakallah for the opportunity. So my brief thoughts on this is that New Atheism is dead. I think we have buried New Atheism. We're walking away from the janaza, if you like. And I think even atheists, people who call themselves skeptics, even appreciate this as well. And even at the time of New Atheism, you had academic atheists who weren't very happy with the New Atheist movement anyway. You had the likes of Professor Michael Rules, who's an atheist. He was basically looking down at the New Atheists, saying, you know, we've lost the debate, we've lost the argument, you're caricaturing, for example, religious philosophy and so on and so forth. And this is something that was happening from the very beginning. Now, the kind of New Atheist movement, I know Brother Muhammad Hijab has written a book specifically on the New Atheist argument. It's called the Scientific Deception or something like that. Hijab will talk about when he speaks, and you could download that from the Sapiens Institute website. And basically you see that some of the arguments are characterized as being caricatures of religious discourse. They basically develop straw men of religious discourse, especially in Islamic philosophy. So they would misrepresent key arguments. They would misrepresent a very rich and nuanced tradition. And this is how you would characterize the New Atheist movement. And the reason it's died is because when many of us have, you know, gone to the platform and start debating and discussing these ideas, and when people online are engaging with online material, they start to see and understand that, hold on a second, this kind of, you know, New Atheist understanding that religion is, you know, irrational, that religion has no argument, that religion poisons everything, as Christopher Hitchens says. These arguments don't hold their ground in any shape or form. And when they're scrutinized, I think one of the biggest mistakes the New Atheist movement did was actually give people platform. They actually engage in ideas. And this is why when we had the debate with Professor Lawrence Krauss, because debates, you see, are social things. They're not necessarily there to win anyone over per se. They can do, for sure. But they're there as a strategy to say, look, I'm on the platform with you, and I'm also providing intellectual arguments for my tradition. And the very fact that we're there with them, engaging in an intellectual way, they're already lost. Because the new atheist argument was that there's no point engaging with you. You don't even have an argument. Your arguments are weak, your arguments are futile, and so on and so forth. So the minute they start giving us platform, whether it's online, offline, in the written format, whatever the case may be, is the minute we actually won. Because the minute we actually could provide a robust case for our tradition, it basically annihilated the new atheist narrative. And that was a bad strategy on their behalf. I mean, they didn't think about this very carefully. They didn't think about how you play chess. So that would be my thoughts, really, that neo-atheism is, as a movement, is dead. And the likes of Muhammad Hijab, yourself, Sabur, this channel, and others, they've provided phenomenal service to Islam, to show that, number one, Islam makes sense. We have an intellectual, robust tradition. We have intellectual foundations that are true, and whatever comes from truth is true. Number two, we have shown the kind of ethical paradigm that it makes sense and is coherent. It's come from the one who is the source of all goodness, Al-Bar, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also we've shown that our tradition makes sense existentially, because it solves the key critical questions, such as, where do I come from, where am I going, and what am I supposed to do, and stuff like that. And neo-atheism doesn't provide any of those answers in any shape or form. In actual fact, neo-atheism, with its very hardcore philosophy of philosophical naturalism, just doesn't make sense of anything that makes us human. Like, objective morality, and we could discuss this later, doesn't make sense under philosophical naturalism. The fact that we have inner subjective conscious experiences, what makes you human, that you have this first person experience, doesn't make sense under philosophical naturalism. Our ability to reason doesn't make sense under philosophical naturalism. Our kind of intuitions of an ultimate purpose for our existence, a purpose of our life, not just in our life, doesn't make sense under philosophical naturalism. And so on and so forth. So many things don't make sense under philosophical naturalism, which is really the philosophy, the armory of the new atheists. And that armory has been dismantled from that perspective. And we can dismantle it today as well. So that would be my kind of 10 pence on the issue. Jazakallah.
Absolutely. And I'd invite, like we do on every show, anybody who disagrees, if you're an atheist, especially a new atheist, you're more than welcome to join. It'll be the first time you'll be interacting as a new atheist with Hamza Sources while he has a wristband for weightlifting on. So that'll be something.
That's my mask. It's my mask.
Oh, it's your mask. Okay.
Yeah,
Hamza's he's a bit of a gym fanatic, so I just assumed it was that. So I'm going to move to Brother Abbas. I've seen you interacting with atheist fanboys, I would say, new atheist fanboys, and really putting up some of the repetitive parroted arguments that you would expect them to. And I've seen that obviously Hamza deals with it with a very philosophical, intellectual, from an intellectual perspective, and so do you. However, you challenge them not only from I guess a higher philosophical sort of level, but also in terms of just basic common sense, how what they're saying is not making any rational sense, right? So could you give us some of your thoughts on how you feel at the grassroots level, their followers, how they're parroting these arguments without fully understanding that these are not really that strong?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So let me just first start, Sabur, and say that I hope you finish that wall off behind you. There's a bit missing there. So I hope you complete that soon, inshallah. But anyway, really from my observation of Hamza's debates and Brother Muhammad Hijab's debates and watching their videos and mashallah learning from them, and what appears to me as a person who I would regard as non-intellectual, let's say layperson, is that their arguments seem to stem from arrogance. They're qualified in physics or they're qualified in mathematics, and they start moving into the realms of philosophical debates and philosophical discussions, which they have no idea about. Or they start moving into arguments of religion where they've studied no religion. They have no knowledge about the foundations of Islam or what the Quran actually says. they seem to just be Googling stuff, just like every other layperson Googles it. Now, the reason why I can actually say that is that even with the Lawrence Krauss debate, when Hamza, and I've watched that debate, mashallah, even though it was a very long debate, probably 3 or 4 times, but what comes across is that it was just straw man after straw man after straw man. And he just didn't seem to understand what Islam actually stood for. So there was a complete disconnect of the reality of what Islam is to their perception of what Islam is because of the Fox News narrative or the or the Daily Mail or whatever they've been sort of reading. And Dawkins does the same thing. Sam Harris does the same thing. Lawrence Krauss did exactly the same thing. And so from a layperson, it really did come across that you're stepping out of your lane, you're not qualified, and yet you're not humble about that. You're making an assumption that just because you're educated in one field, somehow you're qualified to talk about every field. And that's what really comes out. And with their sort of supporters, the people maybe that I might have had a discussion with, Skydive Phil perhaps is one of the more intellectual out of the group, but they seem to just believe verbatim whatever they're told. But I remember seeing your debate, for example, Sabur, with what's his name, at Speaker's Corner. It was about evolution. And you just delved in a little bit about what type of evolution do you believe in, and he just started stumbling, and clearly he didn't have the knowledge base, but he's just assumed that what he's been told must be true. So he's just accepted it. And often this whole notion about religious people being blind followers, really the people who follow these people are very blind, because they accept things on the basis that their person of who they idolize, whoever it might be, is somehow telling the truth, is somehow accurate, even though they don't have any qualifications to be talking about those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're definitely you're definitely summarizing the grassroots new atheism in a nutshell, that they are socialized into it. And in terms of their leaders, they are, they have a background in, say, zoology, but they'll talk about things to do with, deep theological ideas, which, philosophers and theologians have been wrestling for thousands of years. So, we really have to keep in mind that, just because they're loud doesn't mean they actually know what they're talking about. So before I get to hijab, I just want to say welcome to Tony. Last time you were here, you didn't get to speak, so we're definitely going to hear from you today. So after hijab, I'll go over to you. And someone else joined us, Blackmail. Nice name. But you left, so you can just come back, and we're ready to have you. And like I said, we're going to give the platform over. We're going to give some time to atheists, especially if you're a new atheist, to come and discuss this idea. Is new atheism basically dead? Now, I do want to, before I get to hijab, I do want to make a point clear. We've covered atheism previously on this show, but today we're talking about atheism in terms of new atheism as a social movement, and the fall and the death and the failure of this new atheism, rather than just the strength of their arguments or the lack thereof. Because I don't want new atheists to come on here and say, well, actually what you said about the Kalam argument is not true, it's correct, blah blah blah. I mean, fine, we can have that discussion, but that's kind of a secondary point. The main point is this movement that was supposed to be a juggernaut and take over the world, where on earth is it? And interestingly, I was reading a essay written by Hijab just yesterday or the day before, and it was a very personal, nice essay, inshallah, and maybe he's going to publish it later, in which he was actually describing some of his early interactions with the new atheist literature, which went back about 10 years ago, right? Very interesting stuff. So, I mean, you've seen this, Hijab, from the time that you were at university. I guess that was like their beginning to now, which is like their fall. So what's your thoughts on this movement as a as a social movement?
Well, I mean, first we have to kind of differentiate between new atheism, or what can be referred to sometimes in the literature as strident atheism, and agnosticism or irreligiosity. Because in the case of the former, in the case of new atheism, or strident atheism, where someone actually believes that God doesn't exist, or that they have that notion, it's not an agnostic notion of being unsure or ignorant, let's say, but it's a more strident and bold claim that actually there is no God and so on. The literature seems to demonstrate to us, and I'll explain which literature in a second, but that form of atheism, both in the United Kingdom and the United States, is not prevalent at all. So Linda Woodhead, who's probably got the gold standard in terms of her research on this topic, she calculates, and this is probably 3 years ago or something like this, 2017, that new atheists with that definition are anything between 4 to 5% in the UK. Now, she bases this on British attitude surveys and other things, other kind of census data from 2011 and so on. And if we put that in perspective, that's 1% less than the expected Muslim population. So there's more Muslims than new atheists in this country. And so if you think about it, yes, let's not be totally kind of refusing here in the fact that there may have been some change in demography because of the arguments of people like David Attenborough, who's more, I would say, accepted mainstream, who is an atheist, and people know that he's an atheist, and because he's interacting with nature all the time, people realize that, oh, if this man is, for example, someone who doesn't believe in God, but he's interacting with nature, then potentially he's got something that people should be doing. But obviously as well, Richard Dawkins and others, right? For there to be any kind of demographic relevance to the new atheists, they must have done some work which would be somewhat effective. But what they wanted to do, which is to get people away from religion and into their own, has not been successful in the UK at all, especially from the Muslim community. So if it was, and I think it is, because if you look at the most recent interview that Richard Dawkins has had with his son, he was asked categorically whether he thinks he was winning, and he said yes, he does. And obviously the objective or the mission is for him to get people out of religion and into at least an agnostic or religious worldview, or even better, a strident or new atheist worldview. And he thinks he's winning, but the actual movement from Muslims to new atheists, for example, is so slender that it couldn't even be quantified demographic. And to push that point, I mean, if you look at the United States of America and you look at the Pew Research, which once again is seen as gold standard, it's something like 80 to 90% of people believe in a higher power, despite the fact that almost half the population is irreligious. So we have to differentiate between two things. We have to differentiate between irreligiosity or agnosticism on the one hand and new atheism on the other. And in the case of the former, in my estimation, the reason why, and obviously this is in the essay that I wrote, Scientific Deception of the New Atheist Movement, which can be found for free on the Sapiens Institute website, that in the case of the former, which is agnosticism or irreligiosity, this phenomena started in the 1960s. I mean, people were becoming more and more agnostic, and according to the majority of sociologists that I've consulted or seen in the secondary literature, and obviously there are many names I could quote here, but obviously looking at that essay would save time. The reason, one of the main reasons, and even Woodhead mentions this herself in her essay on the point, that people have moved away from Christianity, for example, into irreligiosity, is because of social liberalism. This is one of the key factors. So, and socialization, primary, from a sociological perspective, primary socialization. In other words, children are being like, before the 1960s, children would be brought up as Christians. Okay, let's say, for example, for the most part in this country, 1940s and 30s, that would be the case. After the 1960s, I mean, the situation had completely changed, where at least half the population parents were telling their children, to put it in a very simplified format, but just for the sake of brevity, parents were telling their children that they can make their own decision when they grow up. And that point of giving the children a choice makes them not even have the fortitude to make a choice, and therefore they're stuck with agnosticism for the rest of their life. So they, in a sense, they're stuck with their ignorance for the rest of their life, because religion for them is not, and for many of the people, is not an issue worth pursuing, especially when it can have practical implications on your day-to-day life and restrictions and so on. So what we see in the UK and what we see in the US is a spread of agnosticism after the 1960s that is primarily, I would say, caused, or I wouldn't say, even sociologists would say, caused by primary socialization and also social liberalism. Now, to what extent have the New Atheist movement been able to get some of these irreligious people into their movement? That can be debated and discussed. But if the objective is to get religious people into their movement, for example, Muslims, then they have been utterly unsuccessful in so doing. In fact, there's a slender, or if any change at all, to the demography from, for example, Muslim to New Atheist. I don't think that can even be recognized in the demography. So from those perspectives, they've been trying to smash Islam all this time, and they have failed miserably. And obviously the showings that they've had in debates where they've failed, and recognizably failed time and time again, hasn't helped their cause. Their most powerful debater was Christopher Hitchens. He was by far the most powerful debater they had. And when he died, I think so did New Atheism, quite frankly, because at the end of the day, who have you got? Sam Harris, who lost debates one after the other to William Lane Craig, and was shown up, upstaged, and beaten quite badly, by William Lane Craig in that debate that he had. Or Richard Dawkins, who now is a 78-year-old man who has very little relatability to 18 to 35-year-olds, and whose book, his new book, couldn't even make the top of the atheist list on the Amazon charts for more than 2 or 3 weeks. We're talking about a complete difference in the interest that was originally shown by the public to their movement in 2008 to 2015, to kind of like an indifference, an apathy people have for the opinions, the broken record opinions of the likes of 78-year-old Richard Dawkins. People are not interested in what he has to say. He doesn't click with people in that way anymore. And because he's made this foundation called the Richard Dawkins Foundation, which is basically based on his own name and brand, he's been forced now to get comedians like Ricky Gervais and other young people that are more relatable and have more mainstream acceptability in order to try and push the agenda forward. But those people lack academic rigor and robustness, which is why they are not to be taken seriously, and for good reason. Ricky Gervais doesn't seem like an intellectual that's any worth his marbles in any way, shape, or form. And he's not going to be the flag bearer for New Atheism. Neither is this Tyson DeGrasse, an individual who also he's moved away from that. Sam Harris has moved away from that after the demoralizing defeats that he's suffered in debates. He's had to move away from discussions like that. And that's why he's now doing spiritual stuff. Even though, as you would see if you watch the latest video I put on my channel, he's a determinist that doesn't think, he's basically a fatalist, if we're honest about these things. And so his propositions to people are useless. He's making people's life worse, actually, if by his own admission and testimonial, that he destabilizes their life by telling them they have no control over it. And so from all of those perspectives and more, people are not happy with the New Atheist movement. People are moving away from the New Atheist movement. It's not nuanced enough. It's not sophisticated enough. Richard Dawkins in The God Delusion spends 5 pages of hundreds of pages just trying to refute the cosmological argument. 5 pages. That shows that he has little to no attention to the philosophical arguments or theo-philosophical arguments being made. And moreover, he didn't want to debate William Lane Craig. That's very clear on the record, because William Lane Craig is a philosopher, and he made it very clear that he does never want to debate a philosopher or someone who is at least qualified in those things. So Richard Dawkins he's completely irrelevant now. Sam Harris is moving away from these discourses into other discourses. Christopher Hitchens is dead, okay? And there's no one, and Daniel Dennett is the least charismatic of all of them. Maybe the most intelligent, but definitely the least charismatic. Another Santa Claus-looking individual. Yeah, so it looks like Santa Claus. The only thing he can be relatable to the people is if he sits under a tree and he gets some children to come and give him gifts. This is what he looks like. He looks like Santa Claus. And quite frankly, he's not going to connect with the public. He can write his journals and his little refutations, and people like me will read them because I'm interested in those things. But people are not interested in Daniel Dennett. So because of the movement, they didn't produce students that could take their place. That's one point. Number one, their arguments were weak. Number two, they didn't produce students that could take their place. Number three, people are finding those people unrelatable. Number four, they got defeated many times in debates. And number five, it's becoming boring what they're saying. And we've heard it all before. And so for those reasons and more, we don't find people navigating from religion to New Atheism. And even the New Atheists themselves seem to have given up on the cause.
That's a really powerful way of putting it. It's actually very interesting that the way that you broke it down in terms of the death of their loudest and the most, I would say, vocal amongst them. And you know, he was actually the poorest in arguments, even though he was the most prolific in his, you know, language, and you know, he had a good command in terms of debates and stuff. However, at the same time, just wanted to highlight also that when you mentioned Sam Harris talking about spirituality again, it just shows, you know, these are things which other atheists don't agree with. Like Richard Dawkins doesn't like that spirituality nonsense, according to him, because obviously that's nonsense from a materialistic point of view, right? But the reality of spirituality obviously challenges that. So I'm going to go to okay, I'm going to go to Abdul Aziz of SCDawah Live. Let us know your thoughts. Are you there, Abdul Qadir? Can you unmute yourself?
What happened to Tony?
Yeah, I was waiting for Tony.
Alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
How are you, brothers?
Alhamdulillah.
Greetings from Uzbekistan.
Where you think?
Mashallah.
Oh,
Uzbekistan.
Uzbekistan. Mashallah, mashallah. Welcome to SCDawah Live. So, brother, what's your thoughts on the topic so far?
I didn't hear so much, but when it comes to my country, atheists are trying to spread their thoughts and defeat Islam. And we're trying to defeat them as well.
Okay.
I follow all of you, and learn some principles and the facts about Islam.
I think there's a slight connection issue, Brother Abdul Qadir, because you come in and you come out. But we got the gist of what you were saying, that, you know, they try and spread atheism in Uzbekistan. I don't think anybody on the panel knows anything about that. So I'm not sure how much we can comment, but obviously the intellectual arguments, they can be dealt with. And the arguments that they would use, I'm guessing, would be the same as the people who used them in the past. So I'm going to go over, just because of your connections issues, I'm going to go over to Aqib Ali Nawaz. Welcome to SCDawah Live. Please unmute your mic and let us know your thoughts on the topic so far.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers. Can you hear me?
Wa alaikum assalam.
Yes, we can hear you. Wa alaikum salam.
I have a very specific question. This might be a bit too early in the stream to ask this, but this is regarding the differences between the contingency argument and the first cause argument. I'm a Muslim and I agree with both arguments. I find both of them convincing, but just for curiosity's sake, I can't reconcile between the differences between the two.
Right.
Maybe if you could elaborate in which situation one is preferred over the other.
Sure. So just before answering your question, Tony is back because you were here earlier, Tony. We want to give you the mic for a while. So what are your thoughts on the new atheist movement and the death of this movement?
Well, I'd start off, of course, I talk about origin of life and origin of the universe. I would say the science is not making much progress in those fields. And you mean as far as socially, like people like Bill Maher and Ricky Gervais and all these, we have the same atheist clowns in America. Very liberal, very against traditional life, any sort of religion. So, I mean, we see it here in the States. As far as growth, it's gonna plateau. I mean, is atheism going to take over the world? No, that's never going to happen. They think it is, of course. But, I mean, Their big speakers are either dying or getting old. I don't see anything changing. Their arguments aren't getting any better. The Lawrence Krauses of the world with their universe from nothing and their unseen, untestable multiverse nonsense. No, it's not going anywhere.
All right, thank you for your thoughts. And also, I want to get your perspective on something. The New Atheist challenge to intelligent design, the likes of Stephen Myers and Michael Behe and Philip Johnson, all these guys. How do you think they've done on the biological perspective? Because that's something that you're an expert on, and you keep very much with that stuff.
Yeah, not an expert. Somebody like James Tour and many other chemists in that field. Yes, I would say, yeah, they're not really putting a dent in that argument. They think they are, but the information problem is so severe. They've pushed it to other planets, maybe aliens seeded life on Earth. Even the most pristine laboratory environments, they can't create a functional protein under any sort of prebiotic environments. Even when we give them all the purified chemical reagents, they're not able to do any of this stuff. Origin of life has been a field of nothing but hype. In the last 40 years, they print their papers year after year to get their grant money. It's not going anywhere. It's a bunch of garbage. Somebody like James Tour exposes them. They don't like it. They call somebody like James Tour, oh, he's not an expert. He doesn't know what he's talking about. Yet they can't refute anything he's saying. Yet the chemistry is not going anywhere in 50, 60 years. So, yeah, it's a bunch of garbage.
Yeah, and also when it comes to, say, the God delusion and the biological arguments that he uses against God, Dawkins uses. What are your thoughts on that?
As far as origin of life?
Yeah, I mean, what he's basically arguing for, not just the origin. The origin he tries to explain using basically luck, right? And he actually does use the word luck in there. And when it comes to sorry,
what's funny is in the movie Expelled, he actually admits that some sort of alien designer could be a possibility.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, you're absolutely right on that. So that was a classic, case of when cornered, he had to admit there's some design. The design might be aliens.
Yeah.
anything but God. Anything but God.
I liked Hamza's debate with Lawrence Krauss when he got him at one point when he said, so the universe doesn't need a cause. And then he paused and he pointed at that light bulb. I don't know. This was, I think, a couple years ago, but
yeah, Hamza, could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, what was that point? Because Hamza, you really pushed Lawrence Krauss in that debate. He got really excited. He has little man syndrome, but go ahead.
That photon.
Yeah, to be honest, guys, I remember the event. I don't remember the details. I'm the kind of guy that if you ask me what I ate for breakfast 4 days ago, I won't be able to tell you. So that was like 7 or maybe 8 years ago now. So I do remember there were some very interesting moments. And I had been receiving emails from atheists, by the way, in America. Throughout the past 7 years, I've been receiving emails actually praising the Islamic stance and approach and saying, this guy doesn't represent me. He came across arrogant. I'm telling you, from atheists themselves, even people became Muslim as well, from what I remember. So you have to understand as well that, generally speaking, if you look at the Krauss book, for instance, it was a very hardcore type of scientism because he wanted to deal with the philosophical question in a scientific way. Because the concept of nothing is actually a philosophical question, not a scientific question. But he said, look, let's assume that the classical understanding of nothing was no time and space. He said, but when we look into physics and we remove time and space, there is something there, but let's call it nothing because the classical understanding of nothing was no time and space. But when you remove time and space, there's still some kind of quantum reality. So my nothing is going to be something. But he misunderstood and did a massive straw man, if you like, of the classical view of nothing, because philosophically it was the absence of anything, no prior causal conditions, nothing at all. So his whole thesis was basically trying to answer the Leibniz question, why is there something rather than nothing? And because he wants science to be able to answer everything, and that's why even himself and Dawkins said, don't ask why. Really, you're just asking how. There is no such thing as why. So they wanted to remove such questions, apply a scientific paradigm on those type of questions. But we know if you study the philosophy of science, there are limitations to these things. And the whole Kraussian thing basically is if you define nothing properly, then we know it's impossible that something can come from nothing. There's always
That's
going to be
nonsense.
there's going to be
That's
some
nonsense.
if something came into existence, if something is muhdath, it came into existence,
Yeah.
or makhluq, it came into existence, there must be some kind of prior causal condition, right? Whether that's
Well, how do you?
whether that's a material cause or a non-material cause, whether it's this, that, and the other, it's irrelevant. The point here for this point is that there must be some prior causal condition, and then when we do some kind of conceptual analysis on this and understand it further and philosophize further, then you have no choice but to conclude there is an uncreated creator or uncaused cause. But yeah, in terms of the specific point of the debate, I do remember something about the photon and stuff like that. But
Yeah,
I don't remember the details. I do apologize.
No, that was good. I remember that. But I mean, you're always left with a pre-existing something. How do you get dynamics without time? How do you get anything without time? He was on a panel with Hugh Ross. He's a Christian physicist, and he was pushed with that very same question. And it was, oh, I don't know, but somebody, you know, one day in the future will figure it out. The old materialism of the gaps argument, you know?
Yeah. And we can, you know, the door swings both ways. So God of the gaps and materialism of the gaps. I like the way you put it there. I want to invite now another guest that we have, and thank you, Tony. Please stay on the screen. I want to invite another guest, Hassan Hussein. Let us know your thoughts about the death of New Atheism, and welcome to SCDawah Live.
Welcome, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
It's real interesting because I think people are now seeing the intellectual dishonesty. Is that they've been hiding behind the word I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. And they're because it's so not just from a religious background or a religious paradigm, that there's proof that there's the metaphysics, there's concrete evidence for it, is spirituality. Like, you can't say I don't know and not progress your exploration towards learning the metaphysical or the spirituality. You know, it seems to me more a political agenda to, you know, take away theism, you know, and it seems like there's personal trauma attachment to it. It's not just I honestly just don't believe in God because I don't want to believe in God. Or, you know, it's not that. It's like they're against Islam. They're against Islam. They're against, you know, they're against pretty much a feeling of someone telling them what to do. That there's a being telling them what to do, and the model Islam and the disciplines it brings is against their worldview. So I think it was going to die eventually, because the way they didn't give no true answers. You know, they didn't give no solutions. You know, like I don't believe is really, to me, what I see when someone says I don't believe is I can't imagine. And imagination and belief is two different things. So I think they were eventually going to fall, and their desperate attempts to grab, you know, fringe Muslim groups or ex-Muslims, and, you know what I mean, like it just became ridiculous seeing an atheist with a Muslim who's a non-Sunni or a Quranist, or, you know, to me it's just a ridiculous attempt, or atheist and Christian, you know, like, really, are we going to do this? Are we really going to throw away our, you know, say our beliefs to attack one monolith group? You know, well, Islam is not a monolith group, but one group of people. You're gonna be our ally. We gotta conquer Islam. So I think basically their whole paradigm was to give someone, you know, their followers, you know, little trinkets and treats but they couldn't fulfill or give them any real answers because they really didn't have too much, but just just a bunch of, they give you a bunch of doubts of your religion. That's what Shaitan does. He gives you doubts. He gets your will spinning. Allah gives you the answer. Shaitan gives you doubts.
You know what's funny? These atheists aren't skeptical of multiverses or abiogenesis. You notice that?
Selective skepticism. They're only selectively skeptical. I just want to invite another guest, just in case they're an atheist, because we don't want to be, preaching to the choir.
Sure.
Sam W, welcome to SCDawah. Please let us know your background and what your question is.
Yeah, so I am an atheist, but I'm open-minded to, obviously, I'm currently reading the Quran. I've read a bit of the Bible, so it's not that I've come to this conclusion by not actually doing my own studying to a certain degree. The one question that I do have, and I was just wondering if anyone could answer this, is if you look how advanced technology's got at the moment, it's super advanced. And the one country that doesn't believe in anything that is probably 10, 20, 30 years ahead of every other country is China. So what I would ask to, the Muslims, the Christians, is just this one question.
Yeah.
What if China have actually found out that there is no life after death, and that's why that they've come to the conclusion of basically going communist and making their whole country not believe in anything? Why would they? Why would they put themselves through such hardship if there was a God? Because as far as I'm concerned, they're all going to go to hell.
Okay, that's a very good question. So I just want to give a bit of background to this, right? Firstly, you're absolutely correct that they are, in terms of technology, they're getting far ahead. They're hardworking people. I mean, those things are correct. I'm not going to disagree with that. However, we got to look at, firstly, two different things. We got to look at the historical aspect, and we have to look at the theological aspect. So what do I mean by that? The theological aspect is there something within atheism or theism that makes scientific advancement flourish? Okay, that's the question. So that's it's kind of, I mean, that from that angle is kind of irrelevant who is the best in terms of science at the moment, because you could have somebody who is far ahead of other nations who have a background which is atheistic or theistic, and that's got nothing to do with the actual beliefs that they hold. It's to do with contingencies, to do with colonization or stealing technology, and so on and so forth. Now, here's a very interesting fact. The Soviet Union, which was militantly atheistic, was competing against the West, which was more Christian, and they utterly lost. And not only lost in terms of economics, but also science. And likewise, we find that science was basically upheld by Muslims for hundreds of years, then Christians, and atheists came pretty late to the party. And you could actually argue that most of the scientists in the world aren't what we would today term new atheists, or with this type of militant atheism. Likewise, another thing you said about China, which I just wanted to speak about, is from the historical perspective. Chinese technology is poor. Right? I mean, I'm not saying that lightly. It's actually really poor. They send out 600,000 students all across the world every year, to Western universities like Australia, Europe, and North America. The reason being because their universities are rubbish, right? I mean, there's no other way of putting it. Another thing to keep in mind is that they are so desperate to work with Western universities like Imperial College London, Oxford, Cambridge, Harvard, MIT, Princeton, and so on and so forth, because their own technologies are far inferior. So what they do is that they pay Western universities to get this cutting edge technology, and then they just mass produce it. So you will find that the Chinese technologies, if you trace them back, they actually can be traced back directly to Western technologies, nothing to do with indigenous Chinese technology. So it's not that their disbelief in God has made them go forward and excel or any of these types of things. Rather, it's basically theft of intellectual property, which according to some US government officials is the greatest theft in human history. We're talking about a large sum of money, possibly hundreds of billions, or thereabouts, in terms of copyright and intellectual properties which were stolen by China, right? The other thing to keep in mind is that in terms of the theological perspective, if you believe in God, you believe there's a higher purpose to life. Studying science, studying the universe is a way of getting closer to God, and also benefiting mankind by finding the cure to the coronavirus or meningitis or whatever. Whoever saves the life of one saves the lives of all. This is in the Torah, this is in the Quran, and you get this from the biblical perspective, the Quranic perspective, but you do not get anything equivalent from the atheistic perspective. Instead, you can profit off death, which is exactly what China did with the coronavirus. They hoarded PPE equipment. They also held on to information so that they can get ahead of other countries in terms of the spread of the virus, and also developing the vaccine. So if you are from a purely atheistic mindset, China's actions during this coronavirus, which has led to the deaths of millions of people, are purely justified because you have no moral anchor. So in terms of the theological perspective and the historical perspective, a theistic worldview helps science to flourish and also gives it an intellectual bedrock and a moral bedrock, which allows science to go way ahead in a way that an atheistic, capitalistic, self-interested mechanism does not.
Sabor also mentioned that there's millions of Muslims and Christians in China, but they can't openly discuss it or say it. They're thrown in prison camps like in North Korea. And I would also agree that China does steal technology. They put their workers to work in factories for 15 hours a day. It's also communism that is holding back religion in that country.
And communism is a religion. Communism is the, if you look at, for example, Xi Jinping, people bow to his image, they thank him. And also, if you look at the symbols of the Chinese Communist Party, there's a lot of religiosity there, right? So we have to keep in mind that religion just doesn't mean the belief in a personal God. Religion is also, from a broader perspective, something that socialist states who take these communist ideas to the extreme, you can also describe them as religious.
Okay,
does that make sense?
Yeah, you have covered quite a bit there, so I do appreciate you explain it in depth. I do have one more question. So, what about then what Saudi Arabia is doing at the moment with the Green Line? Because I'm not sure if you know about the Green Line in Saudi Arabia, but they're building a techno state. Would you say that Saudi Arabia are reading a different Quran, or are the people in Saudi Arabia coming, because what they're building there is basically not benefiting the poor people in Saudi Arabia, and that's a Muslim country. So I don't understand what's going on there.
I actually don't know much about this project. I've only seen a few articles. They call it the Line City or something, right?
Yep, correct.
So I can't really comment on that, but an action a Muslim does or a Muslim state does, and I'm not talking about the Saudis here in particular, any Muslim state or any Muslim group of Muslims does not necessarily represent the actions or the beliefs or the customs of Islam. So, that's how I would explain it.
Okay, thank you. Cheers, thanks.
Yeah, but in terms of new atheism, I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on the death of new atheism, and this topic that we've been discussing so far?
Well, I think it just comes down to social contract and sort of conditioning and sort of where you're born, really. Because at the end of the day, if you've been brought up around religion, then you're more open-minded to sort of follow that. But if your parent, like with my parents, for instance, my mother was Christian and my dad didn't believe in anything. So I was stuck between the two for a very, very long time. And it's only now that I've got to the age of 30 that I've read many different scientific books. Like I said, I am studying a little bit of the Quran. I've studied the Bible. And the only thing that I can't seem to find answers in is everyone can seem to explain everything, but they can't seem to explain, the beauty of love, for instance. So it's making me sort of question that, okay, if as an atheist, I don't believe in God, but then where did love come from? How can a scientist can't explain to me about love?
That's very. So sorry, Tony. Two things. We're going to put up an email address and we'll send you some literature as well. But Hamza Sortsis has actually written a book which includes obviously things about atheism, but also values like love and hope and trust and these things in God, essentially, right? And he has, studied values and where values come from and this sort of thing. So Hamza, you also came from a household which wasn't religious in a traditional way, yet you turned to religion. So maybe you can give some of your thoughts to our friend.
Yeah, so it's a very, actually, what's the gentleman's name? Sorry, brother, what's your name?
Sam.
Sam, I've never ever heard such a profound question before. Honestly, I'm actually really touched and really impressed. Wow. I mean, I'm actually gobsmacked in this day and age where we live in a narcissistic society. And in a narcissistic society, it basically has created the death of love, because what has happened is that we have forgotten the other. And I'm echoing the kind of analysis of the Korean-born German philosopher, I forgot his name now, Byung-Han or something. And he wrote the book, The Crisis of Eros. And he makes a profound point saying in this narcissistic society, we don't know how to love anymore because we don't know how to love the other. Because true love is loving someone that is distinct from you and loving their distinctness, what makes them distinct. And true love is to love them in a way, not the way you want to be loved, the way they want to be loved. And obviously this is my addition to it, but what's very interesting, what the philosopher says, he basically says that we end up really just loving ourselves, that the other now becomes a projection, a protraction of our own egos. And in our society, because of social media and many other things, and because of maybe excessive individualism, it's all about the me, and self-pleasures and excessive self-love. And what I mean by self-love is blameworthy self-love. And so therefore, we don't know how to love anyone else anymore. And we just love ourselves. And if we think we're loving someone else, it's just because it's a projection of our own egos, which I think is very profound. So in this social context, for you to even bring that up, I'm absolutely gobsmacked. I actually value your presence a lot. Yeah. So let's expand on this concept of love, right? Now, in the Islamic spiritual tradition, love is extremely important because the concept of worship, and by the way, if you don't know, the main purpose of our lives in the Islamic tradition is to worship God. Now, worship God doesn't have a kind of post-secular understanding. Worship God means that you know God, you get to know him, you have knowledge of the divine, you love God, you have adoration, right? And the early Muslims understood this from the early period, that worshiping God included muhabba, love of the divine, and that you obey God, and that includes humility, and that you direct all acts of worship to God alone, the internal acts of worship, the acts of the heart, and the external acts of worship. So love is very central in our tradition. For example, God says to Muhammad, upon whom be peace, in the Quran, say, if you love God, if you love Allah, then follow me, meaning follow Muhammad, upon whom be peace, and Allah will love you and forgive your sins. It's that the special type of love. In the Islamic tradition, we believe that Allah is Ar-Rahman. Ar-Rahma is a very kind of intense name. It means a kind of boiling over type of mercy. It's a powerful mercy that no one can stop. And it's an immediate type of mercy. And in the English language, mercy is a synonym of love. And Allah says in the Quran that his mercy encompasses everything, even atheists, right? Even those who reject him, right? Then we have the concept of Allah's name being Ar-Rahim, meaning that he is the specially merciful. And this is a special type of mercy for those who wanted to come close to him, those who wanted to walk through the door of divine guidance and come close to him. And that special mercy is in paradise. Then you have God's name, which is Al-Wadud, meaning the loving, okay? And this name comes from the Arabic word wud, which means the loving that is giving. Now, when you think about God's nature, God's names and attributes, they are what we call maximally perfect, which means they are to the highest degree possible. They are transcendent and they have no limitation, no deficiency, and no flaw. So when you zoom in on God's name, the loving, what Muslims understand is that God's love is the most purest form of love and it's the highest form of love without any deficiency and flaw. Even if you contrast this to a mother's love, because many mothers, their love is probably the greatest love from an anthropocentric perspective. But God's love is greater than mother's love, because when a mother loves, she needs to love. But God doesn't need anything. He is as-Samad. He is the independent, the free of any need. He is, everything depends on him. He is Al-Ghani, the free, the absolutely free. And yet he loves. So imagine how pure his love is. And also the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace, said that Allah, God has more affection for his servants than a mother has for her young ones, right? So this is very, very profound. So divine love is very central in the Islamic tradition. And there are levels of divine love, and how to acquire divine love is to follow the way of the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace. Now, what's even more interesting, and this is very different from the Christian tradition, is that we believe God is maximally forgiving, because if you're maximally loving, you have to be maximally forgiving, because you can't say, oh, I love humanity, I love people, and yet not willing to forgive them. You put barriers to forgiveness. No. So in the Islamic tradition, when you go to the Adamic conundrum, all the way in the beginning, the fall of Adam, as they say in the Christian tradition, in the Islamic tradition, we don't call it a fall. It's actually a slip. And when Adam slips, God teaches Adam words of forgiveness. And Adam and his wife, they asked for forgiveness, and God forgave them directly. So forgiveness was a direct relationship with the divine without any barriers. Now, if you contrast this to the Christian tradition, for example, God can't forgive without a blood sacrifice. God can't forgive without, for example, something external to humanity getting the blame. In this context, so Jesus and the so-called sacrifice on the cross, according to the Christian tradition. So in the Islamic tradition, we believe God is maximally forgiving. Forgiveness is contingent, if you like, or it's centered on who God is. But in the Christian tradition, forgiveness is centered in suffering, the suffering of Jesus on the cross. Whereas in the Islamic tradition, it's a direct forgiveness. All you have to do is raise your hands and do what you call tawbah. Obviously, tawbah is to turn back to God, and that has conditions, but it's literally the human heart connecting to the divine. So we believe God is maximally forgiving, which also indicates his maximal love. And the whole point of the Quran was to announce humanity and announce God to humanity in this way, that he is a merciful, loving, and forgiving Lord. The doors of mercy and forgiveness are always open. We have to make that conscious choice using our free will to actually embrace that love. Now, how do we square the circle now? When you said, where did love come from? In the Islamic tradition, when we see things like love, when we see things like, positive attributes in the kind of cosmos, we understand there is a source to that. So the source of love is actually the loving, Allah, who has maximal love without any deficiency and without any flaw. And not only do we say that God is the source of love, but we believe love and its connected values such as beauty and forgiveness and so on and so forth. These are values that are objective. They are mind independent. Okay, they are mind independent. For example, if we see a mother looking for her child and she's crying, and then when she finds her child, she embraces the child and she's crying and stroking the child, and you could see her that she's overwhelmed with joy now. We would all say that this mother is a loving mother. She's expressing, the peak of human love to a certain degree. Now, if the whole universe were to see that, everyone in the world were to see that and somehow decide that what the mother is doing and the way that she's acting is actually unloving, we would categorically reject this, because the concept of love and the expression of love in many cases is not mind dependent. It's not dependent on the limited subjective mind. We have this kind of axiomatic argument, or we have this kind of, strong intuition that things like love and things like these values and even moral values are mind independent. Now, this is the realm of kind of metaphysics or meta-ethics and so on and so forth. But in a nutshell, when we believe these values are objective, it means it's outside of the individual human. It's mind independent. So we have to raise the question, and like you did, rightly so, where did that value come from? Where did that moral property come from? What makes it that it is mind independent? This is an ontological question. And what we say, the only way to explain that, and atheism can't explain this, by the way, the only way to explain that is to say it came from the divine, because the divine would make sense concerning those two key questions. Where did love come from? It came from the loving. And how do we explain that love is mind independent, where it's come from the one who created human beings and is outside of the universe, and he could make such moral claim, he could make such value judgment. It's not subjective, it's objective, because God himself doesn't have any limitation or flaw. And yes, it's subject to God, but who is God? God is the ultimate authority. So atheism cannot ground that idea of love. Atheism or philosophical naturalism, the new atheists, all they can say is that love is equivalent to having lots of chocolate. That's what they're saying. It's just neurochemicals firing. And what are neurochemicals firing? They're blind and non-conscious. What does that mean? Blind means that there is nothing directing them, no intentional force directing them anywhere. And non-conscious means that these neurochemical firings are not aware of themselves or aware of anything outside of themselves. So their picture of values and morality is reduced to blind, non-conscious stuff. Even Richard Dawkins mentions this in his book. He mentions this in I think page 14 in The God Delusion, and he mentions this, I believe, in the book called A Devil's Chaplain or A River Out of Eden. But the point is, they can't solve that problem. And this is why I spent some time, because I'm so passionate about this, that your very question shows that no one should ever be a new atheist or adopt philosophical naturalist if they value love. And if they believe love is objective and is very powerful. And if we really think about it, my dear friend, love is one of the most powerful things ever in this universe. It can change everything. It can change absolutely everything. And this is why in the Islamic spiritual tradition, it was very focused on how to gain God's love, special love, because everyone has his mercy. Everyone, even the arrogant, even the evil people, are encompassed by God's mercy. And mercy is like a synonym for love. But that special love, how do we acquire that? How do we get to know that? How do we taste that? And I recommend you studying one scholar called Ghazali. And I'm going to end on this. Sorry for the long kind of point. Ghazali, may God have mercy on him. He wrote the Ihya, the Revival of the Religious Sciences. And in the 36th volume, he actually wrote about love, intimacy, and contentment with the divine. And he spends some time talking about what are the causes of love. And he talks about the 4 causes of love. We don't have time to discuss this now. But he says these are the 4 causes of love. And God, Allah, is actually, he is responsible for causing, for all of this. And therefore, God is the only object worthy of our intense love. And that's why in the Islamic tradition, when you study the oneness of God and worshiping God, we must love God more than anything. Yes, we can have natural love for our wives and our friends and our family and humanity and everybody else and our parents and so on and so forth. But our highest expression of love should be for the divine himself. And this also includes our values. The Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace, said in an authentic tradition narrated by Al-Bukhari, and it can be found in Tariq Al-Kabir, he said, love for linnas, love for humanity. The Arabic is linnas, by the way. Not many people know this prophetic tradition. Love for humanity, what you love for yourself. And the scholars say, the Islamic scholars say, that we must be committed to the goodness and the guidance of all people. That's what love is. One more final point. I'm really, really sorry about this, but it's such an amazing, I don't want to lose the opportunity. If you love yourself, you have to love God. And let me explain what I mean by this. And Al-Ghazali spoke about this. And what does self-love here mean? It doesn't mean a narcissistic self-love. It's a mature self-love, meaning I want goodness for myself. If someone wants goodness for themselves, then they have to love God. Why? And Al-Ghazali basically solves the problem. He says, well, who created you? Who is the source of love? Who created the physical causes in the universe for you to manipulate and for you to embrace in order to love and in order for you to have goodness, and so on and so forth. And he says, if you love yourself in this way and you don't love God, then you are basically besotted with your own fleshy desires. So our tradition is extremely rich concerning love. Unfortunately, many Muslims don't talk about this. You know, sometimes we come across as a little bit, I don't know, not in line with the prophetic way. But, you know, many of us, you know, we're learning and we're still on a journey. And people need to hear this. So, yeah, you triggered me in a very positive way. It would be really good to engage with you off this, because your question itself is just phenomenal. It's just look what you've done to me, man. You've changed my state of being.
No,
Yeah,
I
so
appreciate the
I
answer.
I don't know if that makes sense.
I appreciate the answer. And again, the only reason that I asked is because as I'm getting older, I'm realizing that, you know, what would be the point of life? Because at the end of the day, when you do something bad, you know, you feel bad. When you do something good, you feel good. And again, scientists can't explain that. You know, they can't explain emotion and they can't explain love. So this is why I am sort of investigating other areas and, you know, ultimately trying to sort of make the right decision myself.
Sam,
eventually.
so I mean, I don't want to ask too many questions about your private life, but there's people in your life that you love, right?
Of course.
Good, yeah. So, and there are people that love you as well, right?
Of course, yeah. I would hope so.
So what Islam teaches us to do is to really embrace that love and love people back, but also to have a spiritual realization. If I can feel this much love from a human being, and I'm given this much love from a human being, imagine the love of the divine. Because the divine is the source of all of that love. And that's what is the next step, the next kind of spiritual step when we're trying to talk to people about these things, to explore that and to find ways of understanding that. Because if God is maximally perfect to the highest degree possible without any deficiency and flaw, then the happiness and the joy that you get from loving others and receiving love, then imagine the type of special love that we can achieve and that relationship that we can have with the divine. It is something that's going to be so sweet. It's phenomenal. And it reminds me of a very old classical scholar, early scholar, Sufyan al-Thawri. He said, if I had to choose between my mother and God to judge me on the day of judgment, I would choose God, because they knew the divine nature. And it was more perfect than anything you can imagine. So
I'm being challenged here. Somebody wants me to talk to an atheist. I think we got an atheist in the room here. You want to discuss some origin of life, brother?
Inshallah, in a minute, Tony. Yeah. Hold on, we're just thank you. Guess the time. But Sam, we've got our email address there. We did drop it earlier. So by all means, email us, Sam, and we can get some information to you, and maybe we can put you in touch with Hamza. Hamza really enjoyed that. So I'm sure he would want to interact some more. So by all means, drop us an email on that email and, join us again.
Yeah, we'll do. Thanks,
guys. What did you think? Was it quite eye-opening there, what Hamza said? Because, a lot of people say that love is, Christianity is love. And, they don't mention that Islam actually has a higher level of love, is the way we see it. It's the way it's explained, as Hamza beautifully explained right there.
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, I think everyone has love in them, don't they? Every human being has love in them. And again, the question that I do, but then again, like, say if somebody has a lot of love and they do a lot of good things, but they're not Muslim, does that mean they go to hell? Does that mean that Allah doesn't love them then? That's where it's good answering the questions, but then my mind goes back to that. It doesn't mean to go back to that, but it always does. Because then I think, well, what's going to happen to everyone else then? We live in a world with 7 billion people. 15% of people in the world don't believe in religion. Let's just say that they're atheists. 2.2 are Islam, 3.2 are Christianity, whatever the Hinduism number is, I'm not too sure. What if everyone's just been conditioned to believe in their own thing, and then at the end of it, really no one knows. People can say they know, but no one really knows, and everybody. But then when I read the Quran, a little bit of it, and I read the Bible, because it's so peaceful, I think to myself, everyone should know about it, because it's only saying good things, it's not saying bad things. So I'm just stuck in that realm of obviously what to believe, really, or sort of what to think.
Yeah, I mean, these are very good points, Sam, and these are fantastic questions and insights. Now, the way I see, so let's break this down a little bit. The way I see the Quran is like a love letter to humanity, and a true lover warns, right? If you're going to go down that direction, these are the spiritual consequences, and that's what a true lover does. Because we've lost the essence of what true love is. We think true love is always saying, "Oh, you're so wonderful, you're amazing. Here's some flowers." This is very shallow. A true lover is committed to the well-being of people. By extension, or by greater reason, Allah doesn't want anyone to go to hell. This is well known in the classical tradition when God talks about that he doesn't prefer disbelief for his servants. He prefers belief. And the classical theologians basically said that God doesn't want anyone to go to hell. But what happens is that people go there because they basically close the door to divine guidance and mercy. It's always open. But God can't force that divine guidance and mercy on you per se from a kind of phenomenological perspective, from our own experience perspective. Why? Because it would lose any meaning. Imagine I put a gun to your head and I said, give charity. If you didn't want to give charity, but you gave it only because of the threat, then that basically loses any kind of moral meaning. So the question maybe should be shifted. It's not like, how can a loving God send people to hell? But rather, how can we choose hell over a loving Lord? And that's one thing to explore. And that's why God says, don't blame me, blame your own hands. The other thing to understand is from a top-down perspective. As I said, Sufyan al-Thawri, the famous scholar, said, if I had to choose between God and my mother to judge me on the day of judgment, I would choose God. Because he knew God was maximally loving and he was just, and no one was going to be treated unjustly. The other thing you need to think about and investigate from this perspective as well is, when it comes to other people, the Islamic tradition says you cannot say this specific person is going to hell or this specific person is going to heaven. We have to suspend judgment because God knows the inner realities of the human being. God knows all of the moral variables. And that's when the Islamic tradition is very nuanced, because we even have a concept that there could be non-Muslims that die in a particular state and they get tested on the day of judgment and they go to paradise. This is based on an authentic tradition of the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace. And there are like four main categories. Some of them include those who couldn't hear the message, others those in between messengers, and so on and so forth. And also the classical scholars, they even made inferences on this and commented that basically, even if there are people living in a town, and Ghazali, the 11th century theologian, even Ibn Taymiyyah, the 14th century theologian, said something similar. But Ghazali talks about, if people live like the Byzantine period, people are living amongst, Islamophobia, that when they hear the name Muhammad, upon whom be peace, it's all negative. He even argued that the hujjah, meaning the kind of, what's hujjah in English? The burden is lifted from them. Like, they're not going to be taken into account because all they heard was negative stuff, and they could be tested on the day of judgment. The other thing is, we need to see from an existential perspective. Don't worry about other people. God knows their moral variables. God knows their context. He's more just than anything you can imagine, more loving than anything you can imagine. So they're in the right hands. We should just worry about ourselves from that perspective. What does Allah say? فَأَيْنَ تَذْهَبُونَ? And where are you going? And this kind of bring it back to your own experience is very important. It reminds me of another prophetic tradition when someone came to the Prophet ﷺ and asked him, tell me about the hour, meaning the last day, the signs of the hour kind of thing. And then he replied and said, what have you done to prepare for it? Because if you understand the divine nature, then you won't worry about the Eskimos, you won't worry about the Hindus, you won't worry about the Christians, because no one's going to be more just and loving than the Creator. However, it should also motivate us to actually share this wonderful message with them as well at the same time. So the whole concept of hell is not antithetical to a loving God, and we can unpack that further as well. And even the whole concept of there are other people that are not Muslim and they are conditioned by the society, Don't worry about it. God has the picture. We just have a pixel, and we're seeing it from a pixelated understanding. No one's going to be treated unjustly. No one is going to be treated unjustly, and they're going to be in the hands of a just and loving Lord. And whatever happens, we couldn't have chosen anything better if we had all the variables at our disposal as well. So hopefully that provides some kind of insight to the question as well.
Thanks. Thank you. Cheers.
One very quick thing, Sam. You mentioned about a good person, potentially going to hell. The issue really here is, what is good? So if I give you the example that Dr. Imran, my friend, often makes on SCDawah, and he says that if you knew of a man who was incredibly charitable, fed thousands of people, provided medicine for thousands more, millions more, was always preaching good things to people and encouraging goodness, and then you found out that he had parents living in a very remote place in the wilderness, no electricity, nothing. And when somebody goes and asks them about their son, this great person who's doing all these great works, who's so rich and wealthy, as to, what do you think about your son? And she says that the mother says, we don't know. He doesn't speak to us. He has nothing to do with us. He doesn't even ask about us. Now, would you regard that person as good?
Of course I wouldn't. No,
And
I
so-
would 100% not, because I mean, a good person is somebody who, if a good person is not eating food in front of somebody who can't afford to eat that food, and maybe sharing that food because that's what the heart tells you to do.
Yes.
I mean, doing things, look, we all make mistakes. None of us are perfect, but giving money to charity, but then coming home and beating your wife or swearing at your wife is obviously not a good thing. So no,
No. So the point what I was trying to make, Sam, is that our perception of what is good is, as Hamza described, we've got the pixel and God's got the picture. In other words, God knows the very, the spirit that resides in you, the heart that resides in you, your intentions when you do things. God is aware of all of those things, your ignorance, your limitations, your intellectual limitations, perhaps to understand certain things. All of that is taken into account. And then, as Hamza, mashallah, very beautifully alluded to, is that the person is judged in accordance to Allah's knowledge, which is complete. And our perception of what is good is very superficial. We may perceive something to be good, but ultimately, if one believes in a creator, one would have to assume, logically, rationally, that the creator would have the best yardstick to measure how good somebody really is and whether they are good. And the ultimate goodness is in recognizing the creator, the one that created you, that gave you life, the very heart that beats within you, that you recognize that creator, you at least make an attempt to discover that creator, if that creator exists. And once it's confirmed to you that the creator does indeed exist, that you obey that creator. And that's the ultimate goodness, the ultimate goal of goodness, to reach goodness. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it makes sense. But then how would you know? Would you know that by just reading the book then, and by listening to like-minded people? I mean, I don't for instance, we all come to this world without a choice. Okay, we're all born, none of us choose to be born. Now, somebody who's religious would say, well, life is precious. God's given you life, so therefore that's what this life's a test. You do good, you do bad, etc., etc. But then somebody who's not religious would just say that we've come from evolution. No one knows how we got here, and enjoy your life, YOLO, live in the fast lane, do what you want. So yeah, is that society? Is it just down to the individual trying to find the truth? I mean, do you feel the truth? How have you guys become like this? Is it by reading, or is it by feeling eventually?
Guys, I got to take on this challenge because I got to run. So anybody who wants to do Origin of Life with me.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
Guys,
Thank you for
I
joining
need
us.
to go now. So I just want to say bye to everybody. I didn't want to drop off in a rude way. Sam, obviously stay online and speak to Abbas and everybody else, and please email us. It was a very fascinating discussion. One thing I just want to add before I go, we have to understand as well that there are some intuitions that we can follow, which is based on the innate disposition, but we have a yardstick, and that yardstick is revelation, and revelation aligns that natural disposition in the most amazing way. And also you need to realize that the highest evil in the Islamic tradition is what you call associationism, which is shirk in the Arabic language, which is not worshipping God and associating partners with him. That is one of the greatest evils, and actually the greatest evil, and the greatest good is actually affirming the oneness of the divine and connecting to the divine and worshipping and loving the divine and obeying the divine. And that becomes a kind of moral priority, and that's the moral lens in which we see the world. So when we see people giving charity, but they actually, consciously and with intention, they basically commit shirk, they associate partners with God, then on balance, by definition, they're not a good person. So it's the way, how do you define a good person? And God is the source of all morality. He's al-bar, the source of all goodness, and he has a total moral picture. But explore that with the brothers. And also what I advise you to do is just experience the Quran. In my view, if someone is sincere and they read the Quran and they understand it from a phenomenological perspective, meaning that the Quran is relating to our own inner experiences as well, I truly believe, Sam, that you're going to find yourself in the book. I truly believe. Just study it and connect with it, and over time and with people's help, God willing, you'll be there. You sound like a phenomenal person.
Please leave your email. Don't forget your email.
Yeah, I will do. Thank you for your time, guys. I appreciate it. I will send my email.
You sound like a phenomenal person, someone that I would love to have coffee with. But anyway, I'm off, guys. Take care of yourselves. Thank you for the opportunity.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Hamza, for joining us. So Sam,
Signature in the Cell would be good to read, Sam.
Very good book. Very good book.
Yeah,
I'll send you a list of books. So if you can email us on scdawah@gmail.com, or if you can leave your email in the private chat section that you were commenting in, then I'll send you an email with the book that Tony is referring to. Hamza.
Sorry, if you just emails scdawah@gmail.com, because in the private chat, even there's other guests that can see.
Oh, that's
so
fine.
It's better to just email directly, and we'll email you back. Chat. Thanks.
And I think also in the meantime, download. There's so many, mashallah, great books and articles.
Okay,
Sapien Institute. You'll find a wealth of information there, inshallah.
Yeah, Hamza took over the whole show. He's like Lawrence Krauss now. I still love you, Hamza.
Mashallah, was a beautiful message. Sam, I think you sort of just quickly asked something. I don't know if I should address it, Sabur, or I'll be moving on to the next guest.
No,
sorry.
Go ahead, Abbas, if you got something to address.
Yeah, I think Sam was saying, how do we realize? How have we realized ourselves? And for me, Sam, being born in England, at the age of around 15, 16, you start asking lots of questions of why. Why do I have to do this? Why do I have to pray? Do I have to follow this religion because my parents followed this religion? And it was very much that journey for me, whereas it was perhaps different for some of the other brothers who actually came into Islam. They were not in Islam when they were, their families were not Muslims, for example. But when I looked at the arguments for Islam, and I looked at the arguments against Islam, I found the arguments for it were conclusive and were certainly far stronger, hugely stronger than anything that anyone could provide against it. So it was I would agree with Hamza. Initially, it's your innate predisposition to believe in something higher than you. I mean, this has been proved within studies by Oxford University that children are actually born believing in a higher power. And this is something that is culturally weaned out of them, to become atheists or to become agnostics. But initially, they come with this predisposition that we believe Allah places in every heart, which is to believe in this higher power. But ultimately, we're told that a person who's humble and not arrogant and is truly searching, Allah says, we will guide this person. So, inshallah, if you are in that criteria, which I'm hoping that you are, that you're humble, you'd like to know, and you truly want to search, then spend a little bit of effort, in that journey, and inshallah ta'ala, you will find Islam, inshallah.
Hey, Sabur, we're gonna. Yeah, I just want to say something. If that atheist wanted to come back, I can do Origin of Life with him. We could have a discussion. And next month, Sabur, we're going to be having on James Tor on a channel. I will email you. We'll try to get you into the stream. I'll let you know if we're going to have him on. Okay.
You're muted, Sabur. I'm sure it was important what you're saying.
Yeah. No problem. No problem. So Tony, no problem. Send me
I'm
an
going to email you.
Yeah. Cheers. Thanks for joining us.
On.
Thank you, Tony. All right. So let's go to our next guest.
Sorry, Sabur, just before you do, Hijab apologizes. He had some issues with his phone. Yeah, he was in there for about an hour, and then unfortunately he had an issue. He was away from home, so he couldn't sort that out. Hamza obviously came on, mashallah, said bye. And Brother Shabir is a little bit late, but he should be joining us, inshallah. Look at Abbas laughing.
Guys, are we gonna do?
Mashallah, I had the two big heavyweights, and I thought, Alhamdulillah, there's Hamza's there, there's Hijab there, mashallah, Sabur is mashallah moderating. You know, I can just relax and enjoy the stream, mashallah.
You still can. You got me in the background. You got me still. Don't worry.
They've left the underdog, the layperson, to sort of handle things.
Allah bless you, Aki. Allah bless you. Okay, sorry, Sabur. Go ahead. Sabur, look at him. He's just texting or something. What are you doing?
Yeah. No.
What happened to the atheist? We had the atheist here. I thought we were going to do Origin of Life. He ran off.
I think we're going to go to OB1. Welcome to SCDawah OB1. Please unmute yourself.
OB1, can you hear us? Hello?
Okay, let's go to Ben.
Okay, let's try Ben.
Is that our Ben?
Yeah,
no.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome, Ben, to SCDawah.
Thanks, guys. How are you?
We're very well. Where are you calling in from?
From Italy.
Oh, nice. Which city?
Torino. Near France.
Okay, I haven't been there. I've heard of it. Abbas, you been there before? You look like a traveler.
Cool.
Not
cold.
Italy.
Unless you want to ski. Do you enjoy skiing?
No.
Then you're not.
I love the mountains, but if I started skiing, I think that might become one of those Mr. Bean episodes.
Yeah, I'd pay to see that.
I had a question for Hamza, but he left. About love.
Hamza's gone. I'm sorry about that.
Yeah.
Hamza done about 25 minutes on love, mate.
You're stuck with me and Sabur, unfortunately.
Can I ask you guys? No.
Yeah, of course you can.
Like he was talking about love and stuff, but I don't understand one thing. Like, what is love like?
Abbas, would you like to address that?
What is love?
Yeah, from an Islamic perspective.
I think intuitively we all know what love is. If you have a mother, or you've had a caring father, or you've had children, or you've had a spouse, a husband or a wife that were kind to you and they were loving towards you, I think we all intuitively recognize what love is. I think the difference perhaps would simply be the level of love, or how deeply you love someone or something. But I think to define it in sort of any very specific way, I think would be difficult, really, because, as I say, it may manifest itself differently within different people and to different degrees. But fundamentally, I think we do know what it is. It's a high state of affection, whereby you would do things for that person, perhaps, or for that thing that you would not ordinarily do for somebody else. You would go over and above what you would do for that person. There's an element of selflessness. So you would do things for that person, even if it meant things were detrimental for you. So, for example, your mother is ill and you go and spend the whole night looking after her. Well, you've just missed your night's sleep. You might have to go and work in the morning, but because it's your mother, you're prepared to go above what you would do for any ordinary person. So I think that's the sort of light that I would see it in.
I would say love is like when two wills are given, but none is taken. Would you say that's a true love?
Sorry, can you repeat that again?
Sorry, my English is not good. My definition of love is like when two wills, will, somebody has a will, like when two wills are given, but none is taken. That's a true love, according to me. The definition of love, that's the true definition of love. In a sense, love is a contract between two people. Love cannot be one-sided. If love is one-sided, then it's forced upon the other side. So it has to be a contract between two parties. And every time the contract is signed, like the will is given freely, but no wills are taken. That's the true definition of love, according to me. Maybe I'm wrong.
So what would you say, for example, in a case where there would be a father who would be very unloving and uncaring to his daughter, for argument's sake, and yet the daughter would still love that parent immensely and be prepared to do anything for that father, and yet the father might not be prepared to do anything for that daughter? Would you, I mean, that would go against your example, right?
No, that would only prove one-sided love. The true love is on the side of the daughter, but the love is not formulated by the two sides. The father is not loving the daughter is loving the side. I was talking about two parties. Because remember, Hamza was talking about love between human and God. That's why I use the example of two parties. Always has to be two parties. And they have to connect with each other. If one party doesn't love, like you said, for example, if God doesn't love us, then only we love God. So it's one-sided and it's forced love. Do you get what I mean? Like maybe I'm not being.
Well,
my English is not good. Sorry.
I'm not really. Because you're saying things like true love, and that's a very weighted term, and you're applying your own sense of reason as to what that means. And I mean, I can't argue against what you feel. But I don't know whether that is some definition that is widely agreed within psychology or within anything else. So I couldn't really argue either way on that.
Would you say you as a human, like if you have a wife, and then would you say like if you love your wife, you have to give your will to her, like truly surrender your will, and she has to do the same thing. If one of you doesn't do the same thing, then the love is not equal. It has to be equal in order to be a true love, a real love.
Can I ask a question? Because this show is obviously about atheism. What's your name again? Ben, right?
Ben, yeah.
So,
Ben.
Yeah, you obviously we're speaking about atheism here. So I think it's going a little bit off topic. So in regards to your own beliefs, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. I was just said like I use this because of Hamza, but go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So in terms of your own beliefs, what do you believe? Like, what's your background belief?
Agnostic, like in between, 50-50.
Okay, so since you're there, I just want to let you know that obviously a theistic view in which we believe in God and an atheistic view in which we reject God, there's a big difference in them when it comes to our conception of love. Because if you're coming from an atheistic worldview, love doesn't exist. It's a biochemical reaction within your brain to help you reproduce and leave viable offspring, right? It's just a evolutionary strategy to help you pass on your genes to the next.
Are you saying that you are made different from me?
No, what I'm saying is that an atheistic perspective gives you very different notions on the origin of things like love and the existence of love.
Based on what?
Oh, good. So that's what I'm explaining, yeah? So an atheistic worldview, fundamentally, everything is broken down into either material causation, material processes or matter itself, right? So everything from a naturalistic perspective, you could break down to essentially like things like love, hope, fear, trust, all of these things, we can just break down to chemicals, essentially, right? But when it comes from a theistic perspective, our epistemic tools are far wider. We can actually believe in things beyond matter. So we can believe in the soul, we can believe in God, we can believe in love as being a value which is real and tangible and objectively true. However, from an atheistic worldview, all of these things are purely redundant, right? Which is why, sorry?
Can I reply?
Yeah, sure, of course you can.
You said, okay, are you saying that the love that we have is wired into our consciousness?
No.
So what are you saying then? You're saying the same thing as me. It comes from DNA. You know DNA. Do you believe that DNA it's a
I don't believe love comes from DNA. That's where we disagree.
Do you believe the memories come from DNA?
Well, it depends. Like, okay, so
you
look,
have the DNA of your father. Did you inherit?
Yes, but that's different to memory. That's different to memory.
How do you know that? How do you know that? How can you prove it?
Well, we have beliefs that we hold which are not genetically determined by our predecessors, right?
No. See, the thing is, DNA, according to the science, if we study the DNA, we can link our bodies. Like our DNA, we can link it to our grandfather, our ancestors, like 1,000 years back, and everything.
I think Ben, we're just sort of splitting hairs here, really, and I don't see where the conversation. Because I tell you why. We're sort of arguing about or discussing something, a phenomena, which fundamentally is often unexplainable. Really, most people grapple at defining it, and often have very sort of different opinions. But what I would actually suggest to you is that you said that you're sort of an agnostic, right?
Can I try and explain it to you? Very easy. I can try and explain it very easy. Just give me 2 minutes, please.
Okay.
2 minutes. Like I said, DNA. This is a fact. If we study DNA, we can find out that our DNA is linked to our grandfathers and our ancestors. Maybe it can go back like 1,000 years back, but our mind doesn't go back this long, this much. We can only think like when 10 years old or 5 years old, when we start thinking. We cannot go any more like back in time. But if we check our DNA, the DNA goes further back. This means that our memories and many other things, like for example, information that we get from our fathers, like looks, everything can be inherited from the DNA. So this is very clear. The mind is like what we call soul and what we call this thing. We cannot prove them. We can only prove the DNA. A DNA is a very good thing which brings the information to us.
Guys hear me?
Sorry, can you mute yourself, whoever's speaking? We're just speaking to Ben at the moment, and we'll bring you in. Apologies.
Can I ask you a question to make this more clear? Like, for example, like let's say love. For example, let's say love is not a genetic from the genes. It doesn't come from genes. What do you think love comes from?
Ben, look, we have to be very careful with our language here, right? When you're saying love, you're referring to a value, correct?
Yeah, a value created by the chemical interactions.
Okay, fine. Okay, now that's where we disagree. When you say love is something that is essentially generated bottom up from just DNA, right? And when I'm saying love, or when Abbas is saying love, we're not talking about the same thing. So let's first clarify that we're not talking about the same thing. Because if you're going to break down the fact that your definition of love can be broken down to a basic biology, no one's going to disagree with you. What we're disagreeing about is your definition and our definition. That's what we're talking about. So if you take the conversation the way that you're doing it at the moment, after you finish, we'll simply say to you, yes, we agree, but that's not our definition of love. Our definition of love is an objective moral value which is beyond your biology. That is the definition that we are talking about today.
Okay. Can I ask you then a question? Like, how do you think that this love comes to us? How is it wired like the internet is wired, or what?
Very good.
We believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that Allah, out of 100 parts of love, he gave one part to the entire world for all of creation. Mercy, I beg your pardon. Mercy, which would be, I would imagine you could argue it's love,
yes,
right?
Yes.
So let me just answer the question. So we believe that inherently this is something that Allah has placed, an attribute, a quality Allah has placed in human beings, that we have the capacity to love. And the point that I'm trying to make here, Brother Ben, is that we're sort of arguing about things from a philosophical stance that are not empirical or analytical. So it leads to hair splitting, because you will say, well, my view is true love means this. You'll find another 100 people, they'll come up with a different definition of what true love really is. Perhaps the greater point, or the more important point really is, how does this affect whether you believe in a creator or you don't believe in a creator? Because the actual concept of love in its entirety may be something that you will never fully understand. Does that mean that you will hold the God question to one side until you actually find out everything about how love works? Because that may never happen. You may well die well before that, right? So I think it's more important to concentrate on, logically, I would say, rationally, the more important questions that affect your reality as they are today and your life after death, if it so exists, rather than being just totally engulfed in a conversation that in reality there's no empiricism to enforce here and say this is what it actually means. Everyone will have a different opinion about that to some extent.
You said Allah, he gave us one part of his love, yeah?
Mercy, yeah.
Mercy.
I mean, one way of breaking this down, I think, to help you, Ben, right?
I think we are saying the same thing then. We are saying the same thing, because what Abbas said, that's biology. So Allah, he made it possible for the humans to evolve. So Islam agrees with what I said with biology, though.
But to be honest, again, Ben, look, it doesn't say biology, does it? We believe that we have something which is within us, which is actually who we are, which is our soul, our ruh. And so this concept of, again, if we start talking about consciousness and where does that come from and how does that work, we're just going to end up in discussions that are, I think, to some extent, quite endless. And I don't believe that, I'm certainly not qualified to start talking about those things in detail. But we're just sort of grappling in the dark with these type of discussions. That's why I think it's far more important to talk about, is there a creator? What's the evidence for that creator? What are the arguments for a creator? Has the creator contacted us via a revelation? Can we find this revelation? Can we test this revelation? I think those are more important questions really for us to be dealing with, rather than trying to define something which is, I think, at best for most people, full of ambiguities and subjective understanding and subjective reasoning.
Yeah, I mean, if we summarize this conversation and how it's related to the topic of atheism, right? Essentially, there's no point speaking about the origin of love from a biological point of view, since we're talking about two different things. And essentially, if you're an atheistic, if you're an atheistic person, you're going to come up with definitions which are, bottom up biological. And if you're a theistic person, you're going to believe a priori, meaning before evidence, that it's rational and it's objectively true that that there's a moral value of love which exists, which is independent of all of the biology. Because I just want to show there's a huge intellectual problem with the worldview that you described, and something that I believe is not solvable, which is the following. If values such as love are the product of evolutionary forces over the eons of time, then those are purely contingent. So in the same way that we have 5 fingers, right, rather than 6, just like that's arbitrary, something like rape would be arbitrarily wrong, which is something that Richard Dawkins actually agrees with. This particular example about the fingers is directly related to something that he admitted to. So the thing is, love itself is something that, you know, we would describe as you know, okay, if it's between man and a wife, it would be you know, this type of love. Between man and God, it would be this type of love. Between a man and his own brother, it'd be this type of love. However, from a purely evolutionary perspective, that love would not really exist. It would simply be a proximate mechanism for the ultimate explanation of our survival and reproduction. Hence, love in its true evolutionary sort of the common denominator here would be that love would simply be a mechanism to help you survive. Hence, it would be illusory. In the same way that philosophers of biology like Michael Roos, they would say morality is an illusion created by our genes to help us survive. Love is likewise an illusion created by our genes to help us propagate our DNA. So in the beginning, you spoke about love in a very objective way, and in a very, I would say, correct way in terms of the power of love. Yet now, when we get down to the biological perspective, we start to see it's totally superfluous, right? And it doesn't actually have any weighing. So what I want you to understand is, if you believe in God, you're not stuck with that worldview. But if you believe in God, you're stuck with that worldview.
How? Like, can I explain? Like, because you said somebody who said that rape is okay. I missed it. Who said that?
Okay, I didn't say rape is okay, and I didn't say someone else said is okay. What I said is that rape being wrong is as arbitrary from an evolutionary perspective that we evolve 5 fingers rather than 6. And here's the thing I just want you to understand. You won't be able to solve this issue that we're talking about. I'll explain to you why. Because the idea that objectively true values can be derived from biology itself is philosophically impossible. Hence why philosophers of biology, evolutionary psychologists, academics who focus their lives and on the field of evolutionary biology, psychology, and related fields, who publish papers, none of them would ever claim that you can get objective moral values from biology. So you're not going to be able to do it on this live stream either.
Can I give it a try?
Sure.
Like you and me, we are talking right now, yeah? If you did not exist, would I be able to talk to you?
No.
No. So what's the first condition for morals to exist? What's the first condition?
I don't understand what you're
existence, life, existence. Without life, you need something primary for something to come after that. Without life, without existence, even God, if he doesn't exist, then there is no morals. You need existence first, and then morals come after. In order for you to process the morals, you need to exist first. Without the computer, there is no information. You cannot plug information into the computer. You need the computer first. You need life first.
Where did the information come from? Where did the information come from? Factories and blueprints don't write themselves. You mentioned the computer.
Wait. Am I speaking Chinese? I said you need life first. You are going to information.
Where did consciousness? I know this love argument is really going off topic, but where did consciousness come from?
Pay attention. Everything in the universe has life in itself is consciousness. If it doesn't have consciousness, it doesn't exist. That's the meaning of life. Yes, that's the meaning of life. What you're talking about? This is a child.
You want to talk? But you have to get life to begin with. You mentioned computers and information, did you not?
You have to get life, he says. Life has to exist. Life is existence itself.
Okay, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Dude, listen to this. This is very simple. Morals. Without life, you cannot have morals. Without existence, you cannot have morals. As far as we know, universe exists. So within the
okay, but you don't. Wait, you don't just get to start. Stop. You don't just get to start at a universe exists.
Yeah, go ahead. What's your point?
My point is,
are you saying a universe doesn't exist? What is this?
No, I'm saying. Okay, you're gonna be quiet for a couple minutes. You're gonna be quiet and listen.
You are saying stuff that is funny. Ben, you are saying very funny
and let
stuff.
Tony explain. Ben, hold on. You've asked Ben. Just give Tony a second to explain because you've asked him a question. So allow him to speak. Go ahead, Tony.
Okay. I think we're going really into this love topic is just way off. But anyway, we can go back to that. You mentioned a universe and also computer informational code. Number one, you don't just get to start with the universe. Where did the universe come from? Number one. Number two, where did information generate from a pool of chemicals? Abiogenesis problem is so severe that there is not one scientist in the world. Let me finish. There is not one scientist in the world that has ever come close to generating informational code. Computers don't write themselves. I'm not done. Computers don't write themselves. Computers don't program themselves. Blueprints don't write themselves. What's that?
You don't need to go so you are going deep in without.
Okay, but you started with the universe. Stop. You started with the universe, correct? You started with. Okay.
Yes.
So how did the universe get here?
How did the universe come here? You show me.
No, I'm putting the burden of proof on you. You know what we believe. How did it get here naturally?
Calmly. Brother Shabir. Let me just say Assalamu alaikum to Brother Shabir there, guys. Assalamu alaikum, Brother Shabir, for joining us. We're just in the middle of
for the janaza, or is it finished?
It's been going on and off, really.
Okay.
But then we will kindly let Tony finish off because I don't want to. I don't want Tony saying.
Can you give me a quick overview of what this gentleman is saying?
Yeah, go ahead, Sabur. I think Tony, if you complete your point, then we'll bring in Shabir.
Okay, well, you don't just get to start with the universe. This is the silly nonsense that Lawrence Krauss does. And then he likes to say it came from nothing, and then he redefines what nothing is. You have to have time, space. Wait, let me finish. You have to have time, space, and matter. You have to have, you can't get anything without time. You can't have dynamics without time. So you don't just get to start. Well, let me finish. You don't just get to start with the universe and then jump into information. You have a major two problems there.
Do you know what you're doing? You're assuming things. I'm not assuming anything. We know the universe exists. We know that universe is the only thing in existence. So it's you have to show me that there is something outside the universe, not me.
No.
Okay, Tony. Okay. No. Okay. Guys, I'm gonna have to step in for a second and stepping in anyway. Let me just clarify here. Tony, thanks. That was really good.
Okay,
and Tony,
but we know the universe exists is not proof for how it got here naturalistically.
Fact.
That's not an answer.
So you have to prove it then.
Ben,
I don't have to prove it.
We believe in a creator, which you already know, but you do have a burden of proof.
Tony, let me just step in for a second here, Tony. Hold on. Ben, what Tony is saying is that do you believe there's a creator?
Who, me?
Yeah.
I don't know. I can assume.
Yeah, exactly. That's what Ben, that's what Tony's saying. Tony's saying that the universe came about from a creator. That's what he's explaining. But instead of just let me finish, Ben. Instead of explaining how the universe came about, you're ignoring that and you're jumping to what about love? So you see, let me just no. I got the mute button, bro. Just calm down. Now listen, I'm joking. Look, it's very simple. Abbas pointed this out earlier, and that is that let us not talk. Instead of talking about love for about 30 minutes, let's find out who created love. Who was the Almighty, tremendous? Who created you first to be able to love? You get it, and that's exactly what Tony's saying. So look, let me just bring in Brother Shabir, and to understand what's going on, because the guy just jumped in. So Sabur, if you break it down to Brother Shabir and then Brother Shabir, I mean, you can see what's going on here. Ben is talking about, love and how love is in the DNA or it's not. Yeah, I don't think it's in the DNA personally, but anyway, that's a different subject. But that's what he's trying to say. And instead, Tony is asking a very valid question. And that is, why don't we talk, and Abbas, why don't we talk about who created us first, and then we can talk about whether love exists in the DNA or not. Go ahead, Brother Shabir.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to jump off now. But thank you for joining us, Shabir and Abbas, Ben, everybody. Tony.
Allah bless you.
I hope Shabir doesn't have internet problems now.
Yeah, no, don't worry, bro. I'm here. Mashallah, it's 9 o'clock. Sabu did have to go, so may Allah bless him. But yeah, I'm still here. Don't worry, Abbas. I got your back, bro. So yeah, give us insight. What were you talking about?
Sorry, Abbas, I will warn you actually. In about 25 minutes, I'll drop off for 2 minutes and come back. If he allows me to continue.
In 25 minutes, we're going to wrap up, bro, in 20 minutes. So yeah, the death of atheism, Brother Shabir. Yusuf, that's, atheism is, as they explained, failed. But we're dealing with Ben at the moment, and hopefully we'll jump to Obi-Wan and Brother Damir there. And Ben is saying, talking about love, but really, Ben, who created us? Shouldn't that really be the question, Brother Shabir?
Well, actually, not only who created us, but I mean, if I were to take it as a Muslim, I am comfortable in the notion that I know where I came from, I know why I'm here, and I know where I'm going to be going. Certainty is backing me up, as opposed to a position where there isn't, based on ignorance. I don't know yet I know what the answer is. Very illogical it sounds. Yeah. So if I'm correct in what I'm hearing, the brother here was talking about love, did you say?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, and its origins. And rightfully and logically, if it has an origin, then whatever it can be pointed back to, it itself will have an origin.
Correct.
So it is only logical to establish where, firstly, we and everything came from before we can proceed to start, dividing aspects of how humans interact and establish what they are. For example, love. Can I say to the brother, just a quick example, I love to hate. Does that make my love valid? I love to kill. I love to kill. Does that make my love valid? Now we will go into discussions. Yeah, exactly. We'll go into discussions of what love is, how it is shown, whether it is in the heart, or it is in the brain, or in the molecules, or the subatomic particles. It will go into a huge discussion, and I'm sure you will know that there are many books written about love. For me, it is very clear. Okay, the source of peace, perfection, love, the way we understand it, has to be a creator. What is your position?
That's for me, yeah?
Yes.
So are you saying that the love that we have comes from God, yeah?
No. I said exactly the source of peace, perfection, love, everything as it is created for us is the creator. What is your position?
I don't know. Like, are you saying that God is the...
Sorry, did you just say you don't know what your position is?
No. I know my position.
Okay, what is your position? Okay, please, I do apologize. If you can, in a nutshell, tell me, what is your position?
I don't understand your position.
No, Ben, what
Ben, respectfully, I will repeat again, and it was...
Can I ask you...
Ben, you see, a good conversation requires a to and fro. Now, I made my position very clear here. I said the source of peace, perfection, love, everything points back to the creator. That's my position. What is your position?
Okay, I'm going to tell you my position, but are you saying that the love comes from God, or God is from his nature? Which one? I don't get it. Can you explain your position? I'm going to explain my position.
Right. Explain your position first so we will know where we stand.
My position is, as far as we know, love comes from, it's a bionic molecular changes, within our being, within our existence. Yeah, what's your position now?
Right, 1 second. So if I go to the molecular level, independently, do molecules love?
In a way, they interact.
No. Do they love? Because by definition, love will. Well, one second. By definition, love is going to require intelligence prior.
Who said that?
I am saying it. You tell me I'm wrong.
You're wrong.
How?
Because you are not telling me like what is evolving. You're saying what the ground thing that what is the ground flow? And I told you it's life.
I think.
And now you are telling me what comes after that. That doesn't make any sense.
Ben, brother, it doesn't make sense because you are a bit confused, respectfully, and I will tell you why. You see, I went to the atomic level. Now let's go to the subatomic level. Yes?
Yeah,
does love exist in the one second, brother, 1 second. So at the subatomic particle level, does love exist independently?
Yes.
How?
Interaction between chemicals.
Right.
That's love.
Right.
That's love.
Right.
Yeah.
One second. So an interaction between chemicals and subatomic particles is your definition of love.
Yes.
Okay, is your definition of love, does your definition of love require intelligence prior?
Intelligence prior. Life is the intelligence that gives.
Right. I don't think you're understanding what I'm saying. So I'm going to ask you again. Love, does it, Brother Ben, does it require prior intelligence to establish what love is? Yes or no?
What is intelligence? You keep using this. Okay. You know what intelligence is? Information is intelligence.
Right. Respectfully.
Interaction between chemicals is intelligence. Anything can be intelligent. Do you understand intelligence?
Ben, you are logically fumbling. Now I'm going to take you back.
Who, me?
Okay, I asked you respectfully, and it's very simple. Yeah, I said to you at a subatomic particle level. Okay,
yes.
Does love exist independently? Then I told you, 1 second. So love requires prior intelligence for us to establish what love definitively is. Do you agree?
No, interaction.
You don't agree. So so listen, Ben, when I'm interacting with a person who I would love to kill, that is pure love, is it? It is.
When you interact with a person,
Ben, respectfully, you didn't hear what I'm saying. No, I'll tell you why. Because you seem to be very confused in what my simple English is trying to explain to you. So I'll go again. I said to you, if I love to kill someone and I'm killing him, is that love pure?
It's interaction. It's not love pure. It's interaction between you and the other person. Chemical interaction.
Right. So the chemical. So tell me, Ben. So tell me, Ben. If you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
50.
You are 50. Excellent. So tell me, in your history, life history, have you ever come across a court case where atoms have been charged with murder or love?
Yes.
You have?
Yes.
Sorry.
So can you cite the 1 second, Ben? Can you cite the Ben, respectfully, cite me that case and where it occurred?
Yeah, wait. Hitler and Germans, they kill people. That's a chemical. You're not listening to me. Atoms. We are made of atoms.
Right. Brother Admin, I think the brother is very, very confused, to be honest.
No, I think to be fair, Ben, bear with us. Yeah. Ben is from Italy, correct, Ben?
Yeah, he doesn't even understand what he's saying.
Oh,
we are made from chemicals.
We are made 1 second.
Chemicals.
I just want to just put that out. There might be a language barrier, no, it looks
right. I understand. Okay, you know what, Ben? I will humbly apologize to you if that is the case, and English or our interaction seems to be.
Your English, I think it's a problem because you don't understand the basics of. We are made from chemicals. If you kill something, your chemicals have killed something. So if you get charged, your chemicals get. We are all atoms. It doesn't matter what you say. You are atom. You can never change that. You are made from atoms. Everybody on the planet knows this. A child knows this. You are trying to make things up, but it doesn't make any sense what you're saying because we are atoms. Nothing can change this. You can say all what you want, but you are an atom.
You see, Ben. Right. Okay. I've heard you. Oh, go ahead, Abbas.
Okay, Ben, you're basically saying that the very function of love
Abbas, unmute yourself.
I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. So, Ben, what you're saying is that the very love is a consequence of chemicals and of atoms, of a physical sense. Is that correct?
What? The chemical?
You're basically you're saying that love is a consequence of a material, material sense, i.e., matter, energy, chemicals, that type of thing. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. So, are you a determinist? Are you a determinist? Do you believe that when the universe came into being from a Big Bang, that every preceding function after that was simply reliant upon a reaction to a function that existed prior to it? Is that what you believe?
Yeah, I think, in between there, yeah.
You believe that, right? Okay. So can we then, for example, arrest and convict and jail a child rapist? Can we do that?
Yes. Yes.
But if it's purely a function of a mechanical system that's already been predetermined, how can that person be responsible for that crime?
The thing is, if he did the rape, and then we do the charges, and then if he was like, his rape was predetermined, yeah, and our charges are predetermined too. So this means that one thing that grounds everything is life, like I said. So if you harm life, then you go against the number one rule of the universe. It doesn't matter if you everybody has life. So you cannot go against life. You can go against life, like you can harm someone, but even if it benefits you, it's always wrong. And this is a rule, number one rule of the universe. And
so basically,
if you go against this rule,
that individual you're saying, therefore, is not responsible for committing that crime, because they can simply argue that they are simply tied into a process that they could have never changed. It was inevitable that they were going to rape that child. Therefore, they shouldn't be convicted. They should not be arrested, and they should not be jailed, because it wasn't their fault. It was a chemical reaction. It was matter interacting.
But this is where you're making a mistake.
Independent of their ability to change what was actually happening.
But listen to this. This is where you're making a mistake. It was determined for him to rape, but it is determined for me to kill him for that rape. You know what I mean? It goes both ways. So
what if you decided to free that individual? Would that be right?
No, because it goes against life. The number one, like I said, existence. Without existence, you cannot rape. You cannot.
Maybe you're just making stuff up as you're going along. To be honest, I have
no idea.
I'm actually frustrated because
Abbas,
as you go
along. Go ahead, brother.
Can I ask you one question, Abbas? Just one question, please. This is it's very confusing to me. Like, only God existed at the beginning, yeah? Nothing else existed.
There was no beginning. We don't believe God had a beginning.
But did anything exist with God? At some point, he was alone, yeah?
We believe that God existed eternally and will exist eternally. So there is no beginning for God.
Yeah, but we were not there.
We were not there. That's right. We were not there. That's correct.
So God was alone, yeah? He existed alone. Nothing else existed.
Not necessarily, because God could have, in his creation, could have created things infinitely. We don't know. We cannot answer this question.
What do you mean create a thing? But if he created something, that means that thing did not exist. He had to create it.
Why don't you just ask your question?
I have no idea where this is going. If you just
moment, this is all going
just
into
ask the question.
Sorry,
Brother Shabir. Sorry.
Yeah.
You're back.
Go ahead. Hey, look, Mr. Handsome is back. Listen, brother. Brother, you see, respectfully, you are really hopping in the hope that you will find something which you can cling on to. And
can you answer this question, please?
Respectfully, if I can just carry on. You see, we have not moved on from the previous one, so we are not going to move to the next one.
This is a very important question. It confuses me a lot. If you can help me with this one, I will be thankful.
Sorry, one second.
Sabur.
I want you to come in for this point. We're still speaking to Ben, right? So look, I just want to clarify something. Like Shabir said, you're just asking questions like a machine gun approach, hoping you'll find some hole, some little thing that you can maybe make something out of. I just want to state something. So the Muslim belief is that God created everything. God existed when nothing existed. He is the first, he is the last. However, from an atheistic viewpoint, you have to remember you're in the same philosophical problem the theist is, except the theist has a way of explaining the entire world. Their epistemic cage is far wider than an atheistic cage, and the constraint of an atheistic cage is something that you can never get out of. It is literally a catch-22. So what I want you to keep in mind is that you're coming and you're asking questions like there are problems with the theistic view, when the atheistic toolbox is empty. There are epistemic tools which are missing. So even if you try and say, well, what about this and what about that and what about this and what about that, hoping to muddy the waters, overall in terms of your paradigm is found wanting. For example, I'll just give you a very simple example. You started off speaking about love before you changed the topic. And when you were speaking about love, I showed how your concept of love makes zero sense, because from an evolutionary perspective, love is purely an arbitrary value that we hold on to. And it's no more valuable than hatred and anger and any of these types of behaviors and values. And the other thing to keep in mind is, when we're speaking about existence and we use, say, the cosmological argument or the contingency argument or any of these first principle sort of arguments, the atheist is stuck in the same position, which is they're trying to explain why something exists rather than nothing. And the difference is, with the theistic worldview, we've given a sufficient answer, but from an atheistic worldview, you're literally stuck in a situation where you have to try and explain why anything exists without referring to a higher being, and hence you're left with a massive gap. And that gap is so large and so hard to fill that any of these tiny things that you're trying to pick up here to try and show that you've won something are basically meaningless, because you've got a massive void in your epistemic worldview. So I just want you to realize there's no point trying to muddy the waters with these little points you're trying to win on. Let's stick to the bigger picture. Give an explanation. Give us, no, I'm going to give it to you, but stick on the topic. If you go off topic, I'm going to bring you back to the topic. Give us an explanation, and I'm going to give you the next couple of minutes. Give us an explanation how you can get something from nothing. Give us that explanation.
That's my question to you, because I don't believe that something can come from nothing. You believe that something can come from nothing. I don't believe that. I believe that something always existed, and then we are part of that something. That's my definition. That's why I'm asking you. You need to explain to me, how can something come from nothing, because God created from nothing.
Okay, good. Now, since I gave you the platform, one second. I gave you the platform to speak. You rejected that and you asked a question instead. So I'm going to answer.
No, I explained to you. Sorry, I explained to you. Why are you saying I didn't explain to you? I answered the question you asked me. I said I don't believe that something can come from nothing. That's illogical to me as an atheist. I believe that something always existed.
Okay,
we are part of that something. That's what I'm trying to explain.
Okay. I think firstly what I want to do is I want to make a distinction between what you mean when you say that theists believe something come from nothing and what we actually mean. Okay, because I think what's happened is you have a gap in your knowledge, and you're using that gap to make an argument, and that argument is failing because
trust me, I don't have support. I swear to God, I don't have a gap. I can ask you the question and then you can answer. God was alone, yeah? God was alone. Let's have this conversation, please.
1 second, Ben, 1 second. Let me show you the gap, and let me show you the fallacy.
I can show you that I don't have a gap.
Yes, you do.
I can show you. One question and I can show you.
Yes, you do. And I'll tell you why you have a gap. You have a gap which, even if we go back 2,000 years, Aristotle would have told you that you have a gap right now, Ben. The gap that you have is the distinction between material causation and effective causation. So when we refer to something coming from nothing, we're not referring to a effective causation. We're referring to a material causation. In other words, we do not believe something came from nothing. We believe everything was created by God, but God is not a physical matter that is just existing and floating around somewhere. So because
Perfect.
that distinction, one second, Ben.
How did
One
he
second,
create?
Ben. I'm gonna have to ask the admin to mute you, or you're simply going to be over talking me. What I'm trying to explain to you, this entire time, you did not make
Can we
the
have a
distinction.
conversation support, because you are talking and I'm not saying anything?
No, Ben, you ask a question and I'm answering it, and I made the claim, so let me justify it. The claim I made is that you are arguing from ignorance, and now I'm trying to justify it. Now let me complete my justification, and then you can defend yourself. Okay? So here's what's happening. I made a distinction between material causation and effective causation, something Aristotle pointed out 2,000 years ago. And that is a distinction which you repeatedly did not mention. And that showed me you're arguing from ignorance. And since you're arguing from ignorance, it's something that needs to be highlighted, because if you're going to have ignorance and compound the ignorance with confidence, you haven't actually reinforced the argument. You've only reinforced our understanding that people like you do not know what they're talking about, yet they try to make sure that the other person looks like they're losing an argument simply by assertion rather than argumentation. So over to you.
Okay. See, you didn't even understand my question. God was alone. He was the only thing in existence. I understand what you said, because I read that. I have read everything that you said, but you don't understand one thing. If God was alone, there is nothing that existed with God. Nothing. God was the only thing in existence. Remember that. So he had to create from something. What did God do? He created from nothing. Because are you saying that God,
Ben,
he came from God? Is that what you're saying?
Ben, you've
That's
asked
the
this
only option
question.
we have.
Ben,
Huh?
you've asked this question a couple of times. Look, Ben, we're gonna have to
No,
move on.
let me explain this, man. This is
No, Ben. I'm gonna answer you, Ben. Ben,
Okay.
just give me a second.
You're running.
Give me
You're
a second.
running, man. You're running.
Am I? Ben, listen to me.
You're running. You're not letting me finish.
No, because what
Ben, we're going around in circles. Hold on, Sabur.
Ben's
No, it's not
thinking
in
is that
circles. I never asked this
Ben's
question.
thinking is that
Ben,
Ben's
can God?
thinking is that
Listen, I will ask you one question, Ben, to answer your question, and that is, can
My
God
friend,
do
you
anything?
never let me
Ben,
ask the question first. Let me. I never
you asked
finished the
it three
question.
times. You asked it three
When?
times, Ben.
When did I ask?
Ben, you asked
When
how
did I
can
ask the
God
question?
listen?
When?
Ben, listen. You said, can God create from nothing? Is that what you asked?
No. I never said that. I said, listen, you're not. This is the problem. Listen, then I'm gonna explain. I never said, can God create from nothing?
Go ahead.
Said God was the only thing. God was the only thing in existence. That's what I said. The only thing in existence. And I'm not talking about material. I'm talking about everything. Everything. God was the only thing, because if anything else existed, then God is not God. God has to be the only thing in existence. So if God was the only thing in existence, there are two options. One, we came from God, so we are God. We are his essence. Like Christians believe Jesus was God. Or we have another option. God created from nothing. You cannot escape this.
Okay, Ben, look, I'm
Give
sorry.
me another option. Give me the third option.
Okay, Ben, just 1 second. That's a false dichotomy.
Give me the third option.
Ben, 1 second. That's a false dichotomy. I'll give you the third option. God existed without any material things, and God created us, matter, from nothing. Now you're going to turn around and say,
exactly.
Wait, 1 second, Ben. You're going to turn around and say, no. The only two options are either we're created from God's essence, which is you're saying is a Christian view, or God created from pre-existing matter? And I would say no, those two limited options are simply because you don't know who God is. We believe God can do all things. That's the very definition of God. We believe God is God. What you're doing is you're taking your limited...
Well, that's a logical contradiction.
Your limited... One second. You're taking your limited human...
You're making logical contradiction
and
now.
what you're doing is you're superimposing your own limitations upon God. You're saying because I, as a human being, I cannot make something out of nothing, then therefore God cannot make something out of nothing. So what you're basically doing is this.
Just agree with me, Sabur.
You're imposing your limitations upon the creator of the heavens and the earth. And the fact I have to simply tell you is this. It doesn't matter what you think. It simply doesn't matter what your limitations are. What does matter is how insignificant you are to the greatness of God, and that insignificant thinking of yours cannot limit the majesty of God. And until and unless you understand that, then we're simply going to be going around in circles.
No, Brother Shabir, you agreed with me, Shabir. You agreed with me, and I thank you for that. Remember at the beginning,
I don't think we did, Ben. But Brother Shabir wants to have a word. If you just
Brother
be polite here, Ben, I've given you a lot of time, Ben. So if you just be polite a little bit and let Brother Shabir have a word. Go ahead.
How you cutting me all the time?
If you want to be cut, this is how I cut people, Ben. Just to be clear, but I've kept you around. Okay, go ahead, Brother Shabir.
Brother Ben. You know, I mean, you did say you are 50 years old, and sometimes it does take quite a time to actually fully appreciate and understand how much we do not know. Okay, now you have in your conversation with us right now have sounded very, very confused, and I say that with sincerity and not to try and offend you. Okay, but in matters of understanding something, you have to try and establish how much you know, how much you do not know, and if you do not know, you try and find out before you formulate a reasonable conclusion. In this instance, you really are not able to have anything comprehensive that we can actually consider logically, rationally, or reasonably. So I'm going to just say something in a nutshell. I've said this before, and I'm just going to say that I want you to tell me what you understand of what I say to you, yeah? God became book for man, man has to become word for God. For man is a book through his microcosmic multiplicity and his state of existential coagulation, whereas God, when envisaged in this context, is pure word through his metacosmic unity and pure principal activity, that of creation. What did I say?
Even Shabur is laughing.
What did I say?
Can you hear me? I think I'm mute.
Ben, what did I say?
I'm not actually laughing at what Shabir is saying. I was actually looking at the comments. But Ben, I would say, you please just listen.
Abbas is laughing.
Okay, listen, Ben, do you want to answer what Shabir said, or we can by all means move on?
I will answer, yeah, I will answer. But remember,
my question... One sec, please. Just one second, yeah? Shabir is somebody who's been in, the Dawah field, the apologetics field for like 20 years. When he is talking and you're snickering away and laughing, I'm simply not going to accept that as the host, so I'm just going to remove you. It's as simple as that. You can simply get lost. You can simply get lost, and we're going to move on to a more respectable person, because he's one of he's one of the senior people here. If I come across an atheist who's been 20 years in the field, even if I disagree with that atheist, I'll give them some respect. You're frankly a nobody that's coming onto this live stream, and then you're interacting with Shabir, which you should be grateful for. And while Shabir is talking, and if you think I can't interrupt, you're mistaken, my friend, because I can interrupt a million times better than you. You're online talking to Shabir Yusuf, who people try and get autographs of. You're being rude. You're not listening to him. You're snickering away when he's talking. So what I would say to you is bye-bye, and we're going to go to another guest. So we're going to go to ESG. Welcome to SCDawah.
Just very quickly, Sabur, very quickly, inshallah. I'll be trying to be very brief. I tried to explain to him about a child rapist and what if they're not convicted of a crime. And he said, no, they would be convicted of a crime, and that would be predetermined. So when I said to him, well, what if they find him, they decide not to convict the person, even though the person is guilty? He goes, no, but they would be, because that would be wrong. They would be convicted. No, they might not be convicted. And therefore, you would have to argue that that was also predetermined. And therefore, you would have to also argue that that is correct. He's just not consistent. He's just all over the place. And I think my friend, we weren't laughing at Shabir. We were actually laughing at you. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think we were laughing at Shabir. It was more the
guys. We have to have some standards. I mean, that guy was getting away with it.
Absolutely, I agree with you.
Yeah. That's why it's good that we gave him a lot of chances. For goodness' sake, we are going to go to CSG. But Brother OB1 has been waiting a little while.
Oh yes,
Brother OB1, if you can make it brief, because I know the brother told me he's a Muslim. Mashallah, it's okay. We'll let you in for a moment, and then we really need to move to CSG, and then we need to wrap up, inshallah, soon. So, OB1, Brother CSG, you're next in a minute. Brother OB1, if you quickly make your point.
Hey guys, sorry, I'm just wanna. That was incredibly painful to listen to. That's just straight off the bat. I did make Abbas aware of how difficult that was to listen to, but yeah, he was, tripping over himself a lot. And to be honest, I'm not really someone who cares much for the atheistic worldview. I'm more of a Christian polemicist myself, which is why, Abbas, hopefully if you have a stream with SCDawah, you can bring me on, inshallah. I'm not sure when that is, but the next one.
But they're just going to be on literally any minute now. They're going to start the gospel stream on SCDawah. So once you finish here, by all means, go on to the SCDawah one.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Okay. Yeah. So the only thing I was really gonna ask is it's not really a question for myself. It's more, I was just at a friend's house, and he said that he has this Muslim friend who's I believe is Pakistani, and he said that what was it? I think it's one of those those new age liberal Muslims, and he kind of takes the view that oh yeah, as long as you're a good person, there's absolutely no issue. You're human first, this, that, the other, and he basically is making the claim that morality is completely objective for everyone. Everyone has a moral anchorage, essentially, right? As long as they're a good person, everything's all right. There's no problems. So I don't know what would be sort of it's not for me. I just want just because I have my friend listening now. So if you want to just what would be your response to a person like that who sort of takes that standpoint? For anyone can answer. I don't know. It's Sabor or
Shabir. You haven't said very much, so please.
You want me to start and not stop? I'll get thrown off. Going back to the question, you see, brother. Unfortunately, a lot of human beings, seem to have this idea that everything is fine. We all are okay as long as we are good people. The problem starts just there. What definition of good are we going to adopt? And on what basis are we going to adopt it? What may be good for one may not be good for another. What may be bad for one may not be bad for another. And this is based on the idea that we already have collectively agreed on the definitions of the word good and bad. If you were to appreciate a human being and his view, every second of our lives, our thinking processes change rapidly. One minute we may be very jolly, the next minute we are very sad because something may have affected us. And at every given second, if that is happening, and it is, no one can deny that, where and how do you establish for certainty what goodness is? I would venture to suggest, brother, without the guidance that is contained in the Quran, and I make this position very clear, rationally, logically, and reasonably, without the position that the Quran provides us and informs us of what can be defined as good, what can be defined as bad, we will forever be confused. And our standards of what is good and what is bad will constantly change, as we are seeing already. Yeah, just a quick example of homosexuality. Up to 1967, it was illegal in the United Kingdom. Then it was legalized. Now, I'm not touching a raw nerve here. I'm just using an example. There are many other examples which, if we were to use this particular criteria that the brother has established, that as long as we are all good, yes, it is purely subjective. And there is no way you are going to be able to establish definitively what good is without the guidance of the Creator.
Brothers, I'm going to have to just say Assalamu alaikum. I'm going to go on to the SCDawah stream, inshallah, for a bit. So,
I'll
yeah.
be there in a bit, Abbas. Don't
All right,
forget
Assalamu
about
alaikum, everyone.
Wa alaikum salam.
Assalamu
Yeah,
alaikum,
so
Abbas.
brother.
Go ahead, brother.
So so that is what I would suggest. Any individual who claims that as long as we are good people, okay, you are going to need what I'm known for, a yardstick.
MashaAllah. Yeah.
Without a yardstick, it is literally impossible to hold on to the definition of good on a constant basis. So that is the advice I would give to that brother, that he is actually, for want of a better word, just jumped on the bandwagon of, okay, as long as we are good, without actually establishing definitively what good is.
It's almost like an apologist position, sort of like to, he feels like he's one of the Muslims in the UK that feel like they're on the back foot constantly, and they kind of just need to conform,
You see, brother, absolutely. Look, there are many Muslims, okay, unfortunately, who think like that. But look, there isn't an issue with thinking like that. The issue arises when you have to define the words, when you have to establish with certainty what they are actually saying. And 99.99% of the time, when I have engaged with individuals like that, it usually took about 5 minutes before they totally faltered, because there isn't anything they can now lean on. For me, as a Muslim, as I said, and just to bring the subject matter of today, okay, my contention has always been that Islam is logical, rational, and reasonable. Any individual who bases his position on evidence will find that evidence not only compelling but certain in Islam. Whereas atheism, my contention is that it is an advanced state of ignorance and delusion. It is illogical, irrational, and definitely unreasonable. Why I say that? Because if I hold the position today that rape is bad, and tomorrow society turns on its head totally and makes rape good, does that make it good? For me as a Muslim, the guidance makes it very clear. I'm very comfortable in the notion that the guidance is telling me where I should draw the line. Now, if you had two individuals, brother, just as a quick example, if you had two individuals who were about to give you definitive advice on how your life is going to pan out, and one of them is totally certain and has all the information behind him, and one is I don't know, but maybe it is good, maybe it is bad, I don't know really, I think I know, but I don't know, whose position would you take?
Certainty, of course.
Exactly. Any logical, reasonable, rational individual will take the position of certainty. And my contention is that anyone who holds on to Islam has the certain position.
I mean, Shabir, we don't really have to go too far to understand that. We
absolutely
just have to listen to the guy who came on previously. Like, he tripped over himself probably 5-6 times. I mean,
absolutely. I mean, look, we all are on a what I would call on a journey of knowledge, and sometimes we should really humble ourselves and understand that we don't really know when we think we know. Yeah. Many a time in his conversation with us, the universe was always existing. Well, actually, we haven't even gone into the mechanics. Then you tell him,
he didn't even realize that he was a determinist.
Absolutely. Well, but that is the point that the other brother was making, Abbas. Yeah. But I mean, for somebody to come on a live stream and I asked him, have you known of a case where atoms have been taken to court? He said, yes. Now you just realize, well, actually, no, you know what? I think we will take it calm with him. Let him go and learn a bit more and come back again. And I mean that.
To be honest, you guys are quite good. Like I've been on Bob the Builder's stream a few times, and he's nowhere near as tolerant as you guys. So it's it is quite nice. Just one question for Sabor, and then I'm gonna go. I want to go to the live stream. So just one quick question for Subor, if you have time, Subor. I just wanted to know how big of an issue do you believe this new atheism wave actually is? I mean, just speaking, and this is obviously completely anecdotal, living in the UK for, at least a decade, you do obviously, we have the understanding that most people, well, we're told that most people in the UK are atheists, right? That's sort of what we're told. But obviously the reality, obviously on the ground, is much, much different. Like if someone comes to you and says they're an atheist and you press them just a little bit, right? More often than not, you're going to find that they're actually very, very unsure, and they're not like fervent atheists, if that makes sense. They're actually more on the agnostic side, right? Or they're a nominal Christian or a nominal Sikh or a nominal Hindu or something of that nature, if that makes sense. So I just want to know, how prevalent do you believe this phenomena actually is? Because based on what I've seen, based on, and again, it's completely anecdotal based on where I've been, right? Obviously, you would come across them a bit more going to Speaker's Corner, far more often than I do. You're literally in a milieu of people who are from completely different, have completely different worldviews. So, what would be your understanding of that?
Yeah, good question. I would put it in the following way, that these militant atheists or new atheists or people who just want to essentially evangelize atheism and are hardcore naturalists are in a minority. The vast majority of people who are atheists and agnostics, they aren't really certain of their positions, like you said, and they do at the same time hold beliefs which are quite contradictory to atheistic, the atheistic worldview. So they'll believe in something to do with spirituality, something to do with a higher power, meaning, value, purpose, all these types of things. So long story short, I believe these people are, very much, I believe, open to Islam and theism, and they need to be dealt with in a very different way to the way that we deal with new atheists and these militant evangelicals. Because in the same way that if we have a militant Christian, right, like a missionary, a born again, they're very different to your average Catholic, right, or your average Christian. I mean, in fact, even through their manners and the way that they speak, you can tell, okay, this is the average Christian. Okay, this is the minority of these sort of people who are very evangelical and they're full of hatred of Islam and so on and so forth. So I would say it's not a big problem, new atheism. And vast majority of people, they have some beliefs in something non-naturalistic. And that's an opening for us to talk about religion.
Brilliant. Thank you, Subor, for the answer. Thank you guys so much. Assalamu alaikum. And I'll hopefully I'll be back in another stream, inshallah.
Brother Obi.
Yes.
Are you still there? Yeah, I'll tell you. You know what Brother Sabu said? It is absolutely true. Do you know, one day in my short life, I was also a fixer of computer systems. And this 58-odd-year-old man came, and we just started talking, and he suddenly mentioned that he was an atheist. And at that time, I was, using Brother Sabu's word, quite militant. I just jumped straight in. I said, really, are you an atheist? He says, yes. I said, think of something that does not exist. We went round and round, but you know what? About half an hour later, he says, you know what? I'll be honest with you. Although I call myself an atheist, yeah, deep down, I know for sure that all this didn't just come about, because he was an engineer by profession. He was an engineer by profession, and he knew it.
This is what I mean.
And
a lot of people,
absolutely,
in the UK especially,
yes,
they kind of throw this word atheist without really understanding what they mean by it. Do you see what I'm saying? I think they actually
absolutely, brother.
Yeah,
you are right. You see, I mean, he started opening up to me. He says to me, he says, look, I know for sure there must be. It's just finding out who or what it is. So I told him, I said, look, brother, I'm going to tell you my position, okay? Just then his phone rang, and he suddenly started shaking. I said, well, what's wrong? He says, it's the wife. So he quickly picked up and he left. But he came back 2 weeks later. just to continue the conversation. So you are absolutely right. As Brother Sabu said, many people, they are such good people, but I think they were just carried by the wave, of skepticism and militant atheism. Okay. But when they actually sat down and thought about it, they came to the logical realization that all this grandeur of the universe couldn't have just come about as a result of unknown forces or whatever you want to call it. It's impossible. So you are absolutely right, brother, and it was a good question.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you, Shabir.
Excellent.
Thank you, brother. So to wrap up this topic, Shabir, if you can let us know, I mean, the death of New Atheism, the death of this idea, they were going to take over the world. They were, in 2006 with the publication of the God Delusion, it looked like it was curtains for religion, and now religion's stronger than ever. And in fact, religion's making a big comeback even within the Western world. So let us know your thoughts about, the sociological aspect of New Atheism.
Like I told you, Brother Sabu, it has already been mentioned, yes. When that book was published, everybody thought, that's it, religion is going to die. The way the word religion is considered, everything is going to be okay, atheism is going to take over, the age of enlightenment has arrived beyond what was already there. Well, it was a damn squib, respectfully. In fact, right now, and by the grace of the Creator, although the pandemic can be seen negatively, in a way, by the grace of God, it's positive because it allowed all these streams to take place. And the message now is very clear that atheism is a position that is illogical, irrational, and unreasonable. And insofar as the religious individuals are concerned, this is a position that is strange. In 2017, The Independent, they had an article in which the title was, "Why is Atheism Dying?" That was in 2017. Subsequently, respectfully, I say this, that multiple janazas have taken place for atheism. The amazing thing is that the very atheists who came up with ideas, have spectacularly backfired. Like I said, it is irrational, it is illogical, it is unreasonable. They also came up with the idea about the limiting of procreation, but the believers consider it a blessing from the Creator. And so now, apparently, we as believers are outnumbering them. The amount of people that they have now is going smaller and smaller and smaller, to the extent that, on an intellectual level, Brother Sabur, atheism has absolutely no clout at all.
Yeah.
And there is nothing on a reasonable basis that they can proffer to us which cannot be demolished and overturned. So I would actually kindly suggest to the people who consider themselves to be atheists to, on an evidence-based usage, look at Islam, consider it appropriately, not soundbite Islam, as I say, consider it appropriately, and you will find all the necessary answers that every human being is seeking, including all the atheists.
Yep, definitely. That's a really wonderful way of putting it. I really love the term you used, a damp squib. It's really been that underwhelming. Oh my God, we were going to do this, we were going to do that. It reminds me of in the playground, you sometimes get this in films where there's a guy who's running off his mouth, right? And then when push comes to shove, that person's like the biggest coward, right? They're just like hiding under a table, not really doing anything. I mean, just to sort of clarify a point as well, that somebody was asking about earlier, the whole idea that, look, you're saying something can't come from nothing, therefore God can't create out of nothing. Again, it's a fallacy of equivocation. We're talking about two different things here: material causation and effective causation, which even people like Aristotle, pointed out 2,000 years ago. It's not difficult to understand these things. Another thing which is important is something you were saying earlier about atheism being irrational and them not living up to their standards. They're talking about spirituality now, the likes of Sam Harris, right?
Yes.
Which makes no sense. Again, it shows you it's not fulfilling. Don't soundbite Islam. You said it correctly. So likewise, I would add, don't soundbite spirituality. They're trying to be spiritual without Allah. Trying to be spiritual without Allah is kind of like saying, okay, let's talk about a sea without water, right? There's just some sea without water. No, Allah is the reality which allowed everything to exist. So if you're going to try and connect with the universe, connect with the teapot, God knows what this new age nonsense is about. The reality is, why don't you just worship the one who created you?
Absolutely.
You don't need to sit there and meditate and imagine a teapot going around the sun. You don't need to do any of these silly things.
But you know what, Brother Sabur, what is really strange, that in our daily lives, we will always come across a situation where we will have to, I use the word submit, we will have to submit to something that is a greater authority or a greater power.
Yeah.
Now, where right across the board, the whole of earth, if you were to look at the scriptures that are attributed to someone and they go back to the creator, you will find that there is an issue of superiority and inferiority. How in the world can you, with your inferior brain, try and establish without guidance from the creator what the creator is? It is totally illogical and unreasonable. That is what they have been trying to do. And you know what, as you rightly pointed out, step by step, every time they take the logical step, they will come to first spirituality, then they will go further, they will take another step, and ultimately they will come to the realization that there is a creator. And that the creator has already informed us in Surah Fussilat, that is what will happen with human beings until it is manifest to them that this is the truth.
Absolutely. Beautiful way that we can end. Jazakallah khair for joining us, Shabir. Definitely very good having you. Everybody watching, we started off with Hijab, Hamza, Abbas. Over time, they started dropping off. Then, as the ship was going off course, we had Shabir come in as well, mashallah, to keep us on track as well. So, yeah, it's a really wonderful show. Do you want to add anything before we end?
No, I think that's it, guys, right? I think the show proved itself. I mean, the death of atheism.
Absolutely.
I mean, it didn't really have a leg to stand on. Even with what was that guy's name, Ben? Look, what he was saying with the thing. The only thing I wanted to ask him, Sabur, was and that is that he kept on saying, "How can something come from nothing? How can God create from nothing?" In the ending, if you believe there's an almighty, tremendous, all-powerful creator, then he can do anything. How did Moses split the sea? Allah did it.
Absolutely.
So in the ending, they're always going to hit that wall. So jazakallah khair, guys. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you all. Inshallah. We'll be back next week, 7 o'clock, same time. So assalamu alaikum, brothers. Jazakallah khair.
Wa alaikum salam.